All right. This is technically fourth recording of the um research criticism video series, I guess, where I go look other game review, see what they say about Dungeon Siege, and see what they have to know. Um, the previous video, it's not one that I posted, but I still did the recording. I still have the recordings of gaming pastimes video on Dungeon Siege. However, I was having issues with my phone during the recording that I didn't realize until after the fact. As it would turn out, I have to start speaking very clearly in my microphone and not gesturing as much as I normally do. So funny there. Um, with that being said, we are going to be going on to JBJett's video, which I've seen twice, like 2.5 times. It is by far the most in-depth review of the game and the most competent review of the game that I have seen so far. With that being said, there's still issues, and with this video, I'm allowed to put in special flags and topics that I know I'm gonna want to explore in my own video, and use this as a sort of like launching off point of being like, you know what, this is a pretty good review. How do I make it better? You know, what is he missing? What needs to be corrected? That sort of stuff. So, without further ado, let's get started.
For me and many others watching the Gearbox intro sequence, Dungeon Siege represents a very real and very strong nostalgic trip back to 2002, and yet there's just as good of a chance that you've never even heard of Dungeon Siege, considering its lack of popularity compared to games like Baldur's Gate. A large reason for that obscurity is due to how unique the gameplay turns out compared to similar looking games. While at first glance it may look as though it's a standard CRPG based off the party icons along the side of the screen, in reality it has much more in common with games like Diablo and Titan Quest, where you
Yes, this is a really, really important thing. Um, is I was like actually just going back and watching Josh Strife playing through Baldur's Gate 1, which if anyone is his content, that will be a way to date what I'm doing right now. But watching Baldur's Gate 1 playthrough and then watching like a Diablo playthrough and then watching this game, it's like this is really uniquely a middle ground of those games. Um, Baldur's Gate, it does have like a fixed isometric view. Um, and it does have like party formations that you put your people in, but the combat does not run the same as it does in Dungeon Siege. The combat in Dungeon Siege is a lot more Diablo as to how fast paced it is, or how instant things can be. Um, so it is very interesting to know that like this game is like a weird sort of amalgamation and like as its own as its own area that it stands in between these two giants. And unfortunately, it's an area that is not fully explored by gaming developers. So unfortunate.
run into enemies and beat on them while quaffing potions to regain health and mana. In fact, using a full party of up to 8 characters in a hack and slash style game is so rare that even in 2020 there are only a handful of games that even come close to scratching the same itch. Now that isn't to say that the combat was particularly involved, since the majority of the time you are more focused on simply controlling your spell users and switching between a couple of spells that may be useful at the time. Instead, it made for a very unique feeling of grand adventure as you traveled the land with a small band of mercenaries just trying to save the kingdom. My name is JBJett, and you're watching a video game critique for Dungeon Siege.
Very interesting
Dungeon
intro.
Siege began development in 1998 when Chris Taylor left the studio that put together Total Annihilation and founded Gas-Powered Games.
Is Chris Taylor is like the main character that you have to consider when talking about Dungeon Siege. So we have Total Annihilation mentioned and Chris Taylor. I do plan on doing a little bit of a exploration of Chris Taylor and of like the development of this game. I think it's important to to um to have that understanding of like when was this made, what was going on. Um, so it's good that we have a little bit of that here.
With the goal of putting together the RPG that would eventually become what we know it as today. There were two major design goals which shaped the project. First, they wanted a seamless world where the player could walk from the starting zone to the very end of the game without ever encountering a single loading screen. And second, they wanted to thin out anything that slowed down the gameplay, focusing on getting players into the action and keeping them there. Both goals would eventually be met, but it came at a great cost to the work lives of the developers. While the project was initially projected to take 2 years to complete, it instead took them 4 years of almost non-stop crunch to get the game onto shelves.
Yep. This timing, this 4-year time, I've seen 4 years, I've seen 3 years. I think the Dungeon Siege wiki, which I'm finding to be more and more troublesome to interact with as time goes on. I think it says 1999 is when development started, but I've seen 1998 or 1990 times. So 1998 4-year develop. So yeah, we'll have to verify that, but you can do that easily.
In a state that they were happy with. Thankfully, the gaming community responded quite well to the release, leading to 1.7 million sales of the game over its lifetime, and supportive reviews which placed the game only slightly behind Neverwinter Nights and Morrowind on Metacritic. Financially and critically, the game was an absolute success, and yet with the passage of time you can't even find it on a top 100 RPG list.
Yeah, this point here is something that I get confused because if you watch like gamers video, which I think we're going to do as we do more research on the development of it, the gamers video on Dungeon Siege is a lot more like a documentary than a review. There is some critique in it, but it's like it is it's not like doing the same exact thing that like Pixels or Cursed Farms or that Gaming Pastime is trying to do, or even JBJett. Um, but Gamers says that like this game wasn't as successful and that there was a lot of critique around sort of stuff, and it's like there was a lot of criticism for some of the decisions, but it was also very successful for when it came. It was like in the first month, I think it was like the second best selling game in like April 22 or something. But it was like the 16th best selling RPG game of the year that it was released. And it was like very popular. And I'm pretty sure on like the in the regards to the Metacritic, it was literally only just behind Morrowind and Baldur's Gate. I think I think that's the case. There was two games that were ahead of it, but like they were both Titans. Um, so like this game was successful, like in regards to financially and reception. Sure. Um, So yeah, the gamers video did make me like scratch my head a little bit because I was just like, you're making this game sound like it was received worse than it was.
The design choices that led to a backburner story and shallow dialogue options hid the game from the general RPG conscious, while the party-based gameplay and high focus on positioning hid it from most action RPG fans. For all intents and purposes, it seemed like Dungeon Siege was forgotten not because it was bad, but because it was so different from the competition that it's hard to categorize the game.
That point, so we get the thing where he claims that it was forgotten, which I don't think that this game was forgotten really fully. I do think people do come back to it from nostalgia, and as we saw with Gaming Pastime, he found it and was interested in it before he had even played it. He didn't come from this nostalgia position. Um, it was something that he found upon exploration, like just like seeing what was made at the time, coming across it in the wild. So it being forgotten, I think, isn't the way that I would phrase it. I wouldn't call that being forgotten. I need to turn off Steam notifications. 1 second. Okay, there's Steam notifications off. But we'll just continue forward. Remember.
And yet it's due to that lack of categorization, the sheer one-of-a-kind nature of the game, that made me so excited to return to it nearly 2 decades after its initial release. Upon launching the game,
Yeah, the sheer one of a kind nature. I think that really does capture this game. And he captures the issue of this game where it like almost falls in the cracks of two different pillars of RPG play. Um, you do have the Diablo experience where it's like you have your skill trees, you have going clearing through, very fast action play, and then you have Baldur's Gate, which is a lot more in depth with choices that you make, which companions that you choose, the stories of the companions themselves, and this game falls in the middle where it doesn't have like a deep robust story, especially for your companions and between the companions and you, but it also doesn't have like a deep robust like skill tree for the action gameplay. What instead it has like a has like an interesting party based gameplay where it's like you're controlling an entire party of people and controlling their spells, and it's like real time and you can pause and all this sort of stuff. And it literally just falls right in between these two niches, and I think it just falls in the cracks in regards to like other people, like other companies and developers not trying to replicate this or move this forward. I think it just fell to the wayside because of that.
and creating a new character using the questionable character creation tools. Wait. So head changes the haircut, skin changes the face, and hair changes the hair color? What?
Yeah,
You're then introduced as a farmer.
yeah. That character creation is pretty very simple. Uh, very simple character creation. Simple and yeah, not exactly consistent with its labels.
Hand at the far edges of the Kingdom of Ebb as a Krug invasion burns your village. You start off with a dagger and quickly pick up a bow and several spells. The introduction actually does a good job of providing you the tools for creating whatever character you might want, since one of the game's hooks is that you never pick a class. Instead, you level up in one of 4 skills: melee, ranged, nature, magic, and combat magic, simply by using those skills. The rate at which you gain experience then generally depends on how much damage you're dealing with each skill, or how often you use the utility spells on mages. Simultaneously, by specializing in one skill or another, you'll start earning attribute points in strength, dex, and intelligence that let you equip gear that help the associated class, with most strength gear helping your defense, while mage gear increases your mana. While the idea of not having classes has always seemed novel to me, in execution the system tends to run into problems. The ideal fantasy is that you could theoretically branch into every skill and eventually become a jack of all trades that can do everything you might want. But in reality, by multi-classing, you'll most often run into stat problems based on the complicated way the formulas work.
Yes, that is a really succinct and good point. Like the fantasy versus reality of experience and multiplexing. Um, with the open class design that the game sells you on, and just being like, hey, you don't need to, there's no skill trees, like just pick up something and start using it and you'll level up. Um, that like that is the fantasy that it's trying to sell, is like you can be anything. Um, and and a weakness of this game is that it, and something that they could improve upon in future games, is sort of like either sort of chiseling out more robust, like this, and it kind of defeats their own design philosophy though, which is the issue. But it's like you have to chisel out clear avenues for people to multi-class, where it's like, hey, I'm clearly trying to do this thing, so the experience that I'm doing should reflect that, or should balance that out, which is de facto making classes or like multi-classes. So it's like kind of defeating the purpose of the system, or betraying the purpose of it a little bit. Um and I think they try to do that in Broken World of DS2, where it's like they have like a nature magic melee and a combat magic ranged sort of thing as well. It could be, I think I'm remembering that correctly, but that's DS2, that's down the road. Um but yeah, this is the this is the unfortunate reality of this system, where it's very novel in its approach, but like it does not hold up to scrutiny. Like it's a little bit more forgivable in the multiplayer, because you do have a lot more time to sink in, and with the way that experience is generated. But yeah, it is definitely a point of criticism.
See, what the game doesn't tell you is that there's a statistic called Uber levels that can only be seen in the multiplayer screen. If you
Uber levels also can be seen, I'm pretty sure, outside of multiplayer, if you have the LOA expansion installed. Because I'm doing my hard playthrough right now. This is a pre-recording playthrough. It's gonna be referred to anecdotally. It's not gonna be really referred to as like any footage, because I don't have any footage of it. But I can see my Uber level with the LOA expansion that I have installed. Um, so yeah, but this is Uber level discussion, which is a very important thing that no one else has discussed. Which, you know, this is us just doing the bare minimum of popping the hood before we start talking about the cars. And
only work on a single skill like melee all game, then the Uber level should be roughly the same as your melee skill. However, if at level 30 of melee you choose to learn some magic, it would then take the level 31 melee number of experience points in nature magic skill in order to raise the Uber level by 1, essentially requiring around 20 levels of nature before your Uber level rises.
I think that's where the issue of this game really comes into play, is that sort of like Uber level statistic and attributes, because he's about to get into the attributes and like why that's a problem, because it doesn't treat a level for a level. Um, it doesn't treat it equally, and like it makes sense in some cases, because it's just like, why should, when I'm a level 40 fighter or something like that, why should getting one level of nature magic be the same as me getting one level of melee? And there's like logic to that, and that makes sense, but it also just like greatly stifles any multi-classing opportunity, or any way to have your character grow, because if you start doing that, he's about to get in, but it limits your attribute growth, and your attributes are your strength, dex, intelligence, and those directly allow you to engage with the game mechanics. It's like intelligence is your mana pool, strength is your health, dexterity is your natural is like your armor, and also like to hit at range and whatnot. And all of them have factors of hitting and mana as well, I'm sure. But and when you stifle that growth, and it's sort of just like, okay, I have to level my nature magic 20 times to get the equivalent of one melee level, just so I can get one uber level to feed into my attribute stats. It's like, okay, we are getting a little too lost in the sauce here, and we are not making multi-classing a fun thing. And there, I feel like there has to be some sort of workaround for that. There has to be some sort of like calculation that can go in to help expedite the process for people that are multi-classing. Um, like a sort of like almost like catch-up experience type of deal. But who knows?
Now this is important because your Uber level determines stat gains based on the primary skill you use to level your Uber up. For example, a melee character gains a stat distribution of 0.64 strength, 0.37 dex, and 0.09 int per Uber level. In execution, this means that a multi-class character will never be able to use the best gear compared to a similarly leveled specialist character. And while this might make sense from a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none perspective, from a gameplay perspective, it just does not feel fun to multi-class. For an easy comparison, if any of you have tried using melee weapons on your Archmage from an Elder Scrolls game, you can technically do it, but it sure isn't gonna feel good. On the one hand, it's nice that you're given the freedom to develop the character how you want, but on the other hand, trying anything that isn't a standard archetype will inevitably create a weaker character. Regardless of how
Yeah, that is, and that is the that's this is the weird thing when it comes to this sort of game is I don't want to have like I don't want to say that people should have the expectation of me like, hey, I'm John Skyrim and I should be able to do every faction and I should be able to get all of my stats to level 100 and my Dragonborn should be the best at everything. It's like, well, I don't want that for every RPG character. Like, you are playing a specific role, and the problem with this game is that there is a sort of tentative promise to multi-class, but in reality, out like inside of the campaign, it's not very feasible. Like, you can do it with nature magic because nature magic utility is always useful, but it's like, you know, it's that's like really the only thing that you can do with anywhere reliably. And in multiplayer it is a time sink to get any sort of build. Like, again, I know that combat magic 22 is what a lot of melee characters strive for if they're multiclassing, so that they can get access to the spell triple strike, so that their melee attacks do more, like they have like AoE effect essentially when they cast that spell. Um and that's like sort of it. Other than those like niche spells and niche interactions that you're looking for, it's just like, okay, I hit level 2 in nature combat or in combat magic, and now that's all I'm doing. So it would be nice. There should have like there's other ways to actually promote a mixing of these things as well. Is like having more spells like triple strike that overlap with each other, that sort of can help people catch up to parity, in it that can help people catch up to parity in regards to their skills. So maybe when like so conjuration is an example if we're looking at Skyrim, where you like can conjure weapons and you use them to attack and whatnot, and you can be like this sort of like Gish type character. In this game, maybe it's like, oh, okay, there's a spell that you can cast that's like nature magic that lets you attack faster or something. It's like I don't know, like not etherealness, but just like something that help like some lightning strikes or something like, or rapid strikes where you can just swing more, or something where it's like, oh hey, you turn your hands into vines and you attack with them and it deals damage, or like both your melee skill and your nature skill go into the calculation to determine damage and stuff like that. So you can have these cooler cross concepts, and it gives you experience in both your nature magic and your combat magic, or your nature magic and your melee skill. Like that's the problem, is like there's, with the exception of a few spells, there isn't a lot to motivate people to interweave these two skills. Um, there's not a lot of reward for doing so. So yeah.
You might feel about a classless game system, Dungeon Siege quickly gives you the basic tools for each skill and lets you play around with them before settling on the one that you like best. I decided that I wanted to make a character that looks like the box art female warrior and set off on a journey to be the best tank my party could ask for.
The box art character Lady Montbaron. She is There is actually a canon player character, but yeah, it's not really relevant to anything unless you're a big fan of the background lore, but like it doesn't affect your game at all to know that.
I then quickly remembered that the melee skill has absolutely no active buttons to press other than clicking on the thing you want to kill. Initially that may seem kind of dull, but as you progress in the game and unlock more characters of every different skill type, it starts to make sense why the melee and ranged characters are point and forget. If you have a party of 2 melee tanks, 1 ranger, and 3 mages, then it feels completely fine, simply firing and forgetting with half your party as you micromanage which spells to use and when. If you were to play a warrior solo, it might be slightly simple, but the game was never truly designed around the idea of playing one character. Instead, it's all about managing a group with a simple tool set that makes it possible to play in real time if you want to. Alternatively, if you want even more control over your group of adventurers, you can pause the game at any time and send individual orders to each and every person, or more often than not, switch between the hundreds of spells in the game.
Yeah, that is something that people just don't utilize at all. From like other reviews, is the space bar, is pausing and realizing the importance of individual commands. And the switching of spells that he's talking about is very true. Um, Having a very well timed healing wind spell being cast is very important to help keep your party alive. Um, and sometimes you need to do that, or repositioning your backline because of AoE damage that's being dealt to them because of where your front line is standing in respect to the monster that is dealing the damage. That sort of stuff is also very important. Um,
Yes, you just heard me right. There are an absolutely absurd number of spells in the game, of which you might only get to experience a small number of which in the single-player campaign. Due to the way experience is awarded based on damage done, mages suffer due to the decision to make them feel different. In order to make magic feel different from physical weapons, they implemented an accuracy system into the game. The chance to hit is based upon the player's skill level versus the enemy dexterity, plus or minus chance to block stats, and
I'm not sure if I agree with the accuracy being what makes them feel different. So this is realistically like, say, if um magic feeling different from other classes. Um and that's because there's an accuracy for every single one of the classes. All of these things have accuracy. Melee, if after the LOA expansion, I'm pretty sure the accuracy of it is like melee skill versus melee skill, and there's some formula for that to determine if you hit or not. Um, for archers, they have like a percentage error formula that is reduced the more range skill that you have. So it's like you think of it as like a circle, like a bloom that just gets smaller the more skilled you get with ranged weapons, to the point that you just never stop, or you never miss anymore, or you rarely miss. And with mages, a lot of it, and he does get into it, but it's bigger, or it's more important this way. It has to do with casting time. It has to do with traveling speed of projectiles. Those sorts of things are the more also the amount of damage that spells do. Those are the more, I think, pertinent ways that magic is magic feels different from the other classes. Especially since they are also the only thing that's tied to mana at all. They need another resource to exist that the other two classes just don't need. So they don't deal as much damage, but they have unique spells and access to AoE that the other classes don't have. But there's casting time involved. Their projectiles aren't as reliable, as ranged in regards to traveling speed, and potentially even physics, because like if you're casting a bomb spell, it can bounce around, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. You can use it to your advantage, but it can easily be the reason why you completely miss with a spell. So, yeah, I think it's a lot more than just and he does get into it, but I don't think that the accuracy is like the only thing that makes them feel, or like even the first thing that makes them feel.
Regularly results in situations where your warriors cannot hit the enemy right next to them. Mages, however, have a 100% chance to hit as long as the spell projectile makes contact with the enemy hitbox. In an effort to balance this, they made magic do less damage than melee weapons by almost 2 times. And while this might make some sense, the balance of it all
I do have to say, him pointing out, he doesn't say it explicitly, but it's implicit that ranged projectiles can be blocked. There is like block percent chance that if like enemies have like shields or certain if they have certain, I guess, traits, they can block projectiles, but with magic, if the projectile of the spell does connect, it always automatically hits. Um or it always hits and it will always deal its damage. Um which is a powerful thing, to be fair. And so that is a good thing that he's pointing, um and that I didn't exactly address initially.
leaves everything a mess, since warriors typically have better than a 50% chance to hit, weapons scale better with player level, and spell projectiles will often just fail to connect with the target. They try to make up for this at least a little by awarding trivial amounts of XP for utility spell use and healing spells, but at the end of the campaign it's perfectly normal for a warrior to be near level 50 while the spellcasters barely scratch level 30, and even in the best case.
Yeah, what I'm finding through my hard mode run through is even with dropping my I had Zed, who is this guy right here, and I dropped Zed for Merrick, and then I used Merrick and Low Run, that's who this dwarf guy is, for a while, and then I dropped both of them when I came across Boryev and Sikra, and they both were just so much higher level than the two mages that I had in my party. Part of that is due to my reliance on healing spells that I was using them for. I wasn't using them enough to deal damage, and that is partially a skill issue, but even if I was, they would still be behind the curve due to this issue that is um in regards to like magic not being heavily level as much. So, yeah, it's definitely.
Scenario where a player grinds endlessly respawning mobs in multiplayer in order to reach the super spells near level 100 skill level, there's almost no point in the task, since everything in the game can be completed by level 60. In fact, if you look deep enough in the forums, you'll start to figure out that it might not have been physically possible to reach those level 100 spells at all, since
Yeah, this is we do bring up the multiplayer here, and I do appreciate that. It is a little bit weird on the timing, but with the multiplayer, like when you do, like, because the multiplayer has like mercenary, veteran, and elite as like the difficulties, so you can complete everything in the multiplayer on mercenary, which gets you to about level 50. No, no, no. Yeah, it gets you to about level 50, and then you can play through veteran until like level 80, and then at level 80 is when like elite is in play. So like you're playing on the elite difficulty. So you can clear everything in the multiplayer multiple times before like you get to the highest level stuff. And the question is like, oh, okay, I am just leveling up these characters not for the sake of like any content like I am leveling up these characters solely to get additional spells. That's it for the spellcasters. For like melee characters, it could be like, oh, I'm doing this to multi-class to get triple strike and whatnot. But it does come to the issue does arise where it's like I've already cleared the multiplayer. I have already beaten what the multiplayer has to offer. And playing at the higher difficulties doesn't generate any new experience that I haven't experienced before, other than I'm able to use more spells, you know? Because, like, sure, I can wear, I can wear armor and items that have higher numbers, but it's not like there isn't a development of like the combat that you're really unlocking. Like spells do unlock stuff, but it's not, again, it's just like you're playing through the same thing that you've already played through. And it's just like, okay, well this time I can now play with my triple strike melee caster, or I can play with the polymorph spell, or I can play with this or that or this or that. And it's just like, okay, well, I guess if you find that interesting, go off. But so many of these higher tier spells are just like you have to replay the multiplayer multiple times and farm or refarm so many ads to like get them that it's just like what's the like it's almost like what is the point, you know? So multiplayer grinding for spells. Multi that is like that is a really good point and a really big area of criticism because it's just like we did design for a lot of the higher tier stuff to be found in the multiplayer, but even still, even though it's in the multiplayer that we're going to get access to a lot of this stuff, we have to repeat content multiple times to get that. And it does does sort of remind me of like looter shooter type games, looter shooter types or MMO types, where it's like, oh, I have to run this dungeon to get this drop, to get this thing, to get this new thing, like to get this gun or to get this weapon or to get this armor piece that I haven't found. It is oddly reminiscent of those sorts of experiences. Maybe this is like a almost like a prototype or like an early evolutionary relative or ancestor, you know, to that type of gameplay that was gonna come out, Warcraft, and then eventually Destiny and stuff like that. So it is very interesting to see.
Many players started to experience a progress wall at only level 80, where they simply could not find any mobs to continue gaining noticeable experience. Some possible explanations for this could be game testers using super spells to debuff the game instead of god mode, or simply coding in some of the late game boss spells as player usable spells, but either way, it really represents a different style of game development compared to modern studios. In a gaming industry where developers seem more and more concerned with making sure that players experience every inch of their content so that nothing is quote unquote wasted, older developer studios came from a very different perspective, and not necessarily in the way that most people think about. See, when games of the past did tend to be harder in general, with both the possibility of backing yourself into unwinnable situations as well as presenting you with tools that may take literal years of grinding to unlock the legitimate way, they also had an overwhelming tendency to make cheat codes an option. Not only was God mode baked into
Cheat codes. First time that I've seen cheat codes mentioned, by any of the codes mentioned. But yes, there are cheat codes in this game that I've used as a kid, and They don't really add too much to the game. To be honest, it doesn't like I don't know. It does just like they typically trivialize aspects. So it's like I guess if you want to play through and be invincible with all max stats, or to just spawn like the biggest quality potions that you can, or to spawn like really strong spells which you can't even use until you reach the level to use. Um, or to just have infinite gold, or nigh infinite. Like you can do that, but it's just like I don't know at this point why I'm playing the game.
Most games at the time, but most gamers simply accepted their use and enabled them to mess around with the game a bit once they were tired of the natural flow. Whether or not you condone the use of cheating in these old-style games, they were also helpful in making sure that no one was truly forced into bricking a save file due to poor choices or bugs, since at any time you could simply become invincible if the need arose. Some modern games attempt to harken back to this old use of cheat codes, but when it requires you to perform feats or challenges in the main game in order to unlock the mode, it kind of defeats the point of cheat codes, regardless of the effect it may have on achievements and such. The evolution of cheat codes is something I
Cheat code tangent. Yeah. Discussion around cheat codes and games, where they went, because they did kind of sort of just disappear, is an interesting one. But we are getting a little we are getting a little bit on a tangent here. So yeah.
definitely don't have enough research on to really touch on in a meaningful way, but their inclusion in Dungeon Siege is a fact that at least helps to explain some of the late game design decisions. In developing the vast assortment of spells in the game, it seems like they stopped asking what would be useful to the player and instead focused on tapping from every major form of magic in the player's handbook. Abjuration spells that buff armor and stats, evocation spells of lightning and fire, conjuration spells to summon many of the most recognizable
I will say like this use of like these magic schools from Dungeons and Dragons, abjuration, evocation, conjuration, those do not exist in this game. Those the concept, um, referring to spells using D&D magic schools. That concept does not exist in Dungeon Siege. Just to note.
monsters in the game, but they also threw in a bunch of spells that were just random and cool, like shrinking the player characters or drawing mana from the dead bodies around you. In the absence of patching with the ease of modern day, many of the spells were wildly out of balance compared to others, with the problem compounding even more due to the lack of experience awarded to mages compared to other classes.
Um, yes, that is true. It's actually funny because to reinforce this idea, where we are in the game with Makusa Raiders is we are at the end game. This is the Castle of Ebb that we are at. So like this is the end game. And I can see Merrick, he's holding his staff, but he still has his base robe. Um which is an interesting choice. The robes have really good enchantments on them with base regeneration, so it has health regen and mana regen, which is a magic thing that should be dropped more on items to have like base regeneration and whatnot. It's incredibly useful for mages. But it's just interesting to see that he's in the end game and he still has the base equipment that he comes with, which is his robes. Um, and you find him like halfway through, so like or like 40% way through the game. It's really funny.
Lack of experience awarded to mages compared to other classes. As such, only around 6 to 10 spells become useful in your average single-player rush through the campaign, focused around a couple healing spells, a couple damage spells, and a few buffs.
If it's 6 to 10 spells, he says. I know that someone else has said like, yeah, I only use like 4 spells. I only use 4 spells in my play. 6 to 10 spells used for single play. If that is the case for each caster, where it's like each caster only uses 6 to 10 spells. I wonder like how okay that is, if like we need to have more, if we need to expand our repertoire, because I'm like thinking about it and it's just like healing hands, transmute. This is for nature magic, which I'm a lot more familiar with because nature magic is more universally useful. It's a lot more accessible too. I find. So you have like healing hands, healing wind, major heal. You have transmute. So there's 4 already. Then you have like ice shard, you have zap, that's 6. And can I find more? Any of the summon spells that you can use. Um you can use the summoning spells. There's like spark, there's flash, there's multi-spark, but I'm pretty sure spark or multi-spark you don't want to use, like because they're not that reliable. But there's like lightning storm, there's ice shard. Might have already um but like I think like that 6 to 10 number seems somewhat believable, but I'm not exactly like the 6 does seem a little bit low. I think like if it was 8 to 12, I think that might be more accurate for nature magic specifically, the spells that you want to use. But and that's through the run through of the single player, and I'm not sure how, if that is a major point of criticism. If we need to use like, oh, I should be able to cast 20 spells, is 20 the benchmark, is 15 mark? Like what would be this benchmark that we'd set which is acceptable for mages to use like this spell or that spell, you um it's kind of hard to just set that value. But it's not 4 to 6 like someone else had said. And I think even 6 is a little bit low. But if it's like 8 through 12, I wonder if that like I'm gonna like put a nugget in this because like this seems to be something that comes up with reviewers, and I want to see how bad or how annoying, how frustrating that is. And bear in mind, this is with the base game, because if we add LOA, more spells are added to the base game with the LOA expansion. So that 6 to 10 quickly becomes obsolete. That might become like 12 to 16 instead, you know. So it's an interesting conversation, but we have to be like, I don't know, we have to be ready to provide receipts for this and be like, these are the spells that throughout the game, these are the spells that I'm casting. So yeah.
If you need them on the harder difficulties. Instead, the real benefit of all these spells starts to show its head for players who wanted to invest their time into a late game multiplayer mage. When you're playing with your friends, the long grind through the weaker early game mage level suddenly seems worth it when you can start summoning dragons and casting the invincibility spell on yourself. Even in the single player mode, I know of many people who simply didn't care about using the most efficient or min-max builds for characters back in the day, and trying out a new spell every couple of levels was just fun. As a kid, I really didn't care whether summoning a giant gerbil was a waste of time. It was just so freaking cool, so I wanted to do it.
This magnificent empire of stars had crumbled into oblivion, paralyzed by its own power-hungry legions, and torn asunder by an ancient and merciless evil. But the 10th...
I will say I hate what's happening right now. We are playing one track over this opening track and this opening dialogue, and the music is conflicting with itself. I don't know why this is being done. The music at the start of this game is really good. It's very frustrating. This is what's happening.
Legion, the dying empire's most valiant soldiers and most trusted, withdrew far to the west to a land called Ebb, seeking to preserve what their empire had lost.
So, despite talking for almost 13 minutes about the game at this point, I haven't really touched on the story at all, and that feels like a pretty good allusion to how the story is presented in the game.
I um I don't know. You choose when you talk about the story. Like I could completely talk. I could talk about this game for like an hour before I even start to talk about its story. Um, like there's a lot that you can get into, and you as the person who writes the video, it's like you choose when you talk about the story. So if you want to call it an illusion, it's like I mean, no, it's not. You choose this, story and story discussion. You know,
The story could be summarized by a dying guy telling you to deliver a report to a guy in the next town. That guy wants you to report to the mayor in the ice town.
I don't just like looking at this footage. It's just like this. You're not even delivering the report to the person that you're supposed to in this and what's happening on the screen. Like you already have the person in the party that you are supposed to report to, so I don't know why we didn't choose the footage of us talking to Giorn instead of us purchasing Zed to join us on our like company. But I mean, shrug.
In the next town. That guy wants you to report to the mayor in the ice town, the mayor of the
Literally on the screen, it's a warning for the overseer. It's not a mayor, but like this is nitpicky, sure, but it's sort of just like this is the thing that annoys me is like if we're going to criticize the game and like call it like the story simple or just like a background thought, which to an extent it is, we can at least be accurate with the information that we're providing. Like and please criticize this game. There's enough that you can criticize about the story of this game, but if we're like just not even getting like if we're not crossing our T's and dotting our I's, it's just like all right, bro, okay, sure.
ice town wants you to find his mage, who then wants you to find his staff. Then you kind of remember that the ice mayor wanted you to go help Fortress Croft. The people at Fortress Croft want you to kill the Droog, then the Droog want you to kill the Sec, until you finally find the king who tells you to end the dungeon siege. So yes,
So this is 31 summary. And yes, I know it is a summary and I know it's simplified. And I know he does get into it more. You appreciate him so much for getting into it more and going into the details that so many others didn't. So it's just I'm tired, okay? I'm tired of the, the conversation around this game as per reviewers.
for half the game, you are some random postman who just happens to murder every bad thing threatening the towns in between his mailbox tops. I think the purpose of the backhanded storytelling lies in the quote that plays at the very beginning of the game.
And none could foretell that one humble farmer would stand between a vengeance from the past and the survival of the kingdom.
And this is the annoying thing because he in his summary is just like, oh yeah, you're just an angry postman, which might be a going postal reference, but you're just an angry postman between stops of all of the posts that you're going to, you know, and you just go town to town killing everything. I mean, it's just like, or we could just simplify this as it actually is with that quote that you just put on screen, which is, oh, you're just a humble farmer that becomes the hero of the story. Like there's no personal investment for this hero other than go to town and kill all of these. You just go to town and you kill all the evil things and you just become the hero. It's not like I don't know why we're drawing in like postmen because you're not really a postman, really. Um, you kind of like there are points where it's like deliver this message or do this or do that, but like it's not even the entirety of the game, because like once you reach Glacier and it's sort of just like yeah no we need you to save like we need you to become the hero like you're no longer just this postman delivering messages like you are the hero now so it's like and that's like Glacier is like not even halfway through the game so
But in reality, all this story really does is set up a reason for you to travel from one biome to the next without really thinking about why. What's actually funny about the whole situation is that the backstory behind most of the events in the game is actually quite good.
Yeah, I don't know why we say it like without even thinking. Like, it's to go to the next biome without even and it's just like, you know what, yeah. There is the narration of this game does not have personal stakes for the player other than like, hey, we want you to go to this area further down the line. We need you to go do this. And that is valid criticism. For sure that's valid criticism, but even then there is more to it than that. And he does go into it and he does talk about it, but like we're portraying it as one thing and then we're like, oh, but actually the story is very good. And it's just like, well, we can do both of these. Like we can have an accurate criticism, but we can also just like not be unfair when we talk about the story.
If you pay attention to the small bits of dialogue that Merrick tells you, along with the ambient storytelling of the Goblin Laboratory,
It's not just the we'll call this the world building slash background story, as he would say it. It's not just Merrick, and it's not just the ambient storytelling. If you talk to people in the villages, or if you read the books, you get so much more context as to what is happening in the game. And I'm glad that JBJett is actually hinting at the nuanced backstory, or hinting at this backstory, this backdrop that is informing what is happening in the setting and giving more context as to why things are happening. I'm glad he's doing it. Not many of these reviewers do. I don't think any of them but him do. But because everyone just poo-poos the story without even knowing what it is. Um it's still just like we're not even fully getting into the story. We're still not there.
we can start to piece together that the entire conflict of Dungeon Siege was actually crafted by two villains. First, the Goblin King was searching for a source of power to fuel his new inventions, and so he ambushed the great mage of the Kingsguard and stole his staff before trapping him in the ice. It just so happened that the staff of unimaginable energy, which requires 20 intelligence to equip, also happened to be sealing away an ancient evil for the last 300 years. So when the goblins started draining its power, they released the Sec, who dug into the dungeons below Castle Ebb and laid siege to the kingdom. Meanwhile, the Goblin King knew that the king's armies would quickly find his lair if he didn't distract them, so he started to send the Krug rudimentary weapons and magic spells in order to start an uprising against the humans in the area.
Yeah, I don't I'm not even sure if this particularly is accurate. Um Goblin King motivating. What he says here. Um in the story, the Krugs are subordinate to Krug Commander Gresh. He's even referred to as such by like multiple NPCs. And it's also him so Krug Commander Gresh is a necromancer, and when you fight him, he like summons skeletons. He is the one who taught the Krug about necromancy as well. So I don't know where we're getting the Goblin King motivating the Krugs. No, it's Krug Commander Gresh that's doing so, and he's using them to look for magic items because he is also looking for the magic staff, because the staff is what is holding the, like, as this YouTuber said, as JBJett says, the staff is what controls the wards that binds the Sec. And so Krug Commander Gresh wants to find it so that he can free the Sec, because he is Sec. And so that's why he is sending out the Krugs and teaching them necromancy and whatnot. I don't think the Goblin King is motivating the Krugs to distract the armies of the kingdom. I don't think that's the case at all. So yeah.
Likewise, after taking control of Castle Ebb, the sect used propaganda to turn the more militant members of the Droog race to rebel against their human oppressors and attack the nearby military in Fort Croft. And if you don't agree that the story behind
Yeah, the propaganda that's here is, the kingdom is releasing the drakes and the dragon and using them to target the Droog. So the Droog believe that the humans are actually sicking the drakes and the dragon on the Droog. That's why the Droog help the sec. But when you go to the Droog village, they realize that that is a lie. That is not the case that's going on. And when you talk to the champion or like the Droog fighter that's behind the village, he sort of says, "Yeah, these guys were lying to us about this, and can you go deal with the dragon?" And that's how you get that side quest.
the villains is better than the story behind the main characters, you probably just have a human bias. In fact, it's considering all the well-developed backstory behind the main events of the game that you start to realize that the game actually had good writers. It's simply tempting to assume that they weren't used on the playable plotline. I'll never really be
They weren't you like I don't think that's the case. From what other reviewers have said and from what I've started to see, is that the story was sort of thought of after the fact. And so I think that the playable plotline, which is the playable plotline and the backdrop are like kind of hand in hand. Um it's just very bare bones, very simplistic, intentionally. It's like they weren't able to make an extravagant playable storyline choices or with individual motivations, but there is in the files character dialogue for Allura, which is one of the people in this party here, and I need to double check and make sure that there's other, or if there are other characters that have a similar sort of, if they had a similar treatment as you, Allura, but she was given dialogue that was supposed to be said later on, throughout the story. And apparently, some of that dialogue is still in the game files. It just doesn't execute during those different times. So, I'd love to be able to poke around in the game's engine and find these dialogue, like find the dialogue trees and see what's up. Um, so yeah, like it seems that they were cooking a little bit more. They just, 4 years of development, it's probably just at this time, it's just like get out what we can. But it's promising. This sort of what we have in Dungeon Siege 1 is promising for a launching point, narratively, I think. Like with the way that the bare bones of the game and like the world building and background story, because I agree, the story of what's happening is better than the story of what my character is doing and moving forward through what is happening. But even then, with the writers that they have and what is being written, like you could in like another game write something really strong. I don't know what happened in Legends of Arana to well, they do outsource the game to the Mad Dog company, I think. And so like that expansion is made hand in hand with them. And so there might have been different writers and different designs that we're going through. But if I'm like looking at a sequel of this game, it's like there's plenty of stuff to work with in this game to make a further story. The Empire of Stars, the 10th Legion forms its own kingdom. We could look at the rest of the Empire. We could look at the rest of the legions. We could look at like what fractures sort of happen. Um, we can look at like the Kingdom of Ebb, like, is restored, but neighboring places need our help. So in Dungeon Siege 2, we go into neighboring places from the Kingdom of Ebb and help out other places. Like, there's a lot. There's a lot that can be done with this, that the world building does set up. And unfortunately, well, that'll be Dungeon Siege 2. Talk about it.
able to understand why they chose to lead the story for the game the way it is. But the answer to that question is most likely because a story-rich game wasn't the type of thing they wanted to create. In many ways, the thin plotline allows the game to focus on its strengths by simply giving the player an excuse to run through the different environments and feel content to kill absolutely every single thing they see. And boy, does the game excel with that goal. Throughout the game, you travel through around 25 distinct biomes, and I literally just want to show you the sheer scope of terrain in the game by quickly walking you through the journey you take. Farmlands, forests, crypts, shorelines, towns, spider castles, mining towns, mines, snowy forests, mountain ridges, ice caverns, crystal caves, gypsy camps, dark forests, swamps, underground goblin bases, tombs, grasslands, red ridge, canyons, not Arabic cities, hedge mages, castles, dungeons, lava rivers, and the literal depths of hell, all of which flow narratively well into the next, and none of which last longer than an hour if you just want to get to the next one. To make
Yeah, that and so just from this point, the say minutes and then linear narrative. That is a strength of linear game design that this game delivers. It's got a curated story and curated experience that it wants to show you as you are playing through the game. And it's not an open world game where it's like, hey, go off and explore and do your own thing, where the curated experience is just like the exploration of a space. It is, no, we want you to travel through these spaces to evoke these sorts of feelings, these sorts of emotions, and give you these sorts of challenges as you go through our world. And it's completely a completely legitimate way to bring people through a story. It's a completely legitimate way to experience a game. Like, not every game needs to be Skyrim, as much as some other people, other reviewers might want that to be the case. Um linear games can focus on particular feelings really well that are core to the experience, like the sense of adventure, the sense of a journey, the sense of starting as a farmer and becoming the hero and saving the castle. That can be really well captured in linear exploration.
this even better is that almost every location holds several side areas, secret dungeons, and puzzles to complete for often very meaningful loot upgrades. These small, easy rewards make you feel like any exploration is worth your time, even without the coolness factor of finding a secret Aztec temple locked by several hidden buttons in a cavern of magical icemen. Even today, all these different environments come across with a surprising amount of fidelity that wasn't always true for games from this time period. Of course, graphics will always be an opinionated discussion, but I'm personally more a fan of the scope and depth in Dungeon Siege when compared to the hazy draw distances of Morrowind or the never-ending copy-paste halls of Neverwinter Nights. What's even more surprising about it all is that they were able to create a seamless world which still managed to look better than many other games at the time, even without the use of loading screens. Obviously, they could have put the resources they put into a seamless world into other things, but the hack and slash style game happens to be one of the few game genres that benefits most from this specific technical achievement. In a slower paced game where you travel from area to area, talking with characters and holding dialogue exchanges, the gameplay loop lies in careful exchanges and well thought out decision trees as you roleplay what type of character you want to act like. In these methodical, story-driven RPGs, it makes less of an impact if you're interrupted by a loading screen, since it just gives you more time to think about the state of the world and your actions. Dungeon Siege is more concerned with the state of my axe going through that Krug's neck, and the roleplay decisions between fighting through an open great room or going around the sides and murdering all the archers before moving on to the next room. In a game where the time in between each monster lasts 5 seconds instead of 5 minutes, then the 30 seconds you spend on a loading screen can start to make a difference. Alternatively, the breakneck pace of the combat cannot continue indefinitely, otherwise it would wear people out. So, the evenly placed traders in between every couple biomes offers a chance to cool down for a couple minutes, compare stats, sell items, restock on potions, and generally just prepare yourself for the next bout of fighting.
When it comes to the loading screens, I feel like I am it is a testament to this game that they were able to make without any loading screens. However, I do think, especially with the way that the game is, like these different settlements that you find, so like where we are right now. Or well, no, not where we are right now, because this is even out in the open, but like places like Stonebridge, Glaciern, Fortress Croth, um, and like I don't want to say the Travelers Camp because it's out in the open, but it isn't. But like these sorts of settlements, some of them which are just in the wild, some of them are their own places. Like I could see there being loading screens for Stonebridge, for Glaciern, for Fortress Croth, and it not inherently betray the experience that you're getting because you're going into an area that doesn't have any combat elements to them. What's going on when you enter these areas is like, I'm picking up quests, I'm selling my items, I'm buying items, I'm talking to NPCs to get information. There's already a clear barrier there that separates this hack and slash gameplay from the experience that you're experiencing now, which is like the more role playing esque elements, which is like I'm talking to, you know, shopping, I'm getting ready for this next exploration. So I think at the three places that I mentioned, it doesn't do a lot of harm to or maybe even like the Droog village. I don't think it does a lot of harm. Even there's combat in the Droog village, so that one's a sort of asterisk. But I don't think it does harm to the gameplay experience if some of the settlements that you go in have loading screens, and that might actually be helpful to develop to the developers and to the world, because instead of like trying to stitch together this incredibly elaborate game, you can cut it up into sections, which might make it easier for the game to be made and to load in certain things in different areas, and that might save stress from other areas of the development process. That might give more time to have better narrative, that might give more time to make more side offshoot areas for each like loaded area, you know what I mean? So it's I don't think Dungeon Siege has to be 100% all of the time without loading screens. I think there are areas in this game where you get away with having loading screens and like implementing them. And I don't think it would like drastically ruin the game. Um but it is a testament to the game that they were able to do that. You know, I just don't think it the game is like the game is 100% at every moment in time. The experience hinges upon the fact that you can't, or that there isn't a loading screen, you know.
I already touched on the combat a couple of times, but the flow of gameplay is really the crowning achievement of the game in many ways. To give you a good representation of things, I'd like to walk you through one of the best paced combat biomes of the game, the Frozen Caverns. As you travel through the snowy forest, you'll encounter these small little magic throwing monsters, which deal a bunch of damage but are easy to kill if you target them. Then you're introduced to a couple of the ice swordsmen without any other enemies, so that you get to learn that they take a lot of damage and hit hard every once in a while when they actually connect. You're then presented with a fight that implements both the magic throws and the icemen, where you have to start making decisions which to attack first. Now that you've resolved a harder fight, they pull an easier fight in order to introduce the flying monster nests, which you can either destroy quickly or kill a larger number of bugs. The game then forces you to proceed down a narrow corridor in order to continue, thus causing you to come close to several of these stalactites that explode into ice archers as you pass. And so this is how the game introduces new combat elements, separating them into bite-sized chunks so that you can get the experience individually before they start throwing them all together into more complex fighting arenas where you
So I'm gonna let him finish his point. Talking about bite-sized chunks and introducing
have to choose which threat you'd rather deal with first. Finally,
so not only that, but a lot of the not a lot of the bestiarity. Some of the bestiary is also reused later on throughout the game. So like Drake's, for example, it's on our screen. We see Drake's later on. It's just Ice Drake, and then there's like Forest Drake, and then it's like the later Drakes and near Dragon's Wrath that you fight. Molten Drakes at the end of the game too. I'm pretty Black Drakes. Then there's also the Brack, those magic throwing things. There's like the Mage Brack, and then there's the Brack, like the big Brack that stuff. Later in the game, in the desert, when you are outside of the Droog village and around the Droog village, there are Desert Brack, which throw boulders at you. Incredible amount of damage. And so typically you focus any monster that deals magic damage is typically one that you focus in this game. And it's not explicit which ones deal the magic damage and which ones don't, but you can tell by how much damage you're taking which one is dealing magic damage, which one doesn't. Or how much your party is taking. So there's that. So this game does, and this is in part due to its linear design, it does curate encounters and curate your exposure to enemies, which really does help with the flow of combat, which really does help with like learning the bestiary. And that's something else that unfortunately who are big fan of open world design and the technology was there, it's just like, well, hang on, not everything needs to be open world, and in fact you can lose things when you go to open world.
as you near the end of the dungeon, they just start to throw everything at you so that you feel pressured to use resources like health potions in order to surmount the odds against you. While something as mundane as deciding whether to use health potions or not may not seem engrossing, the ice caverns are one of the first areas that the game truly starts to challenge you as a party leader. See, the true challenge is not in surviving any one battle, since the only time you'll
there are a few instances, it's like where 20, 45 caverns are the first instance being challenged. There are a few other notable encounters that you have to make decisions before the ice caverns. The platforms and the mines beforehand, you have to make decisions. Especially when you go down one of the platforms and there's 3 rock golems there. You have to start making decisions fast if you do that. In the Westrun Cross, there are a few encounters when you walk in the middle of the room and then all of a sudden you're ambushed. You have to make decisions there. So like there are encounters before the ice caverns where you have to start making decisions. And I don't want to say that ice caverns are like easy or like not unique, but it's just there are multiple times throughout this game where it's like it's sort of like a knowledge check, it's sort of like, hey, are you paying attention? Hey, here's a curveball. Hey, stuff to make sure that you're not just left clicking. And even though gaming pastime may not like that, may not like ambushes, and feels like, oh, I don't get to left click anymore. Oh, I have to actually like think about this encounter, and I have to actually think and micromanage my gameplay. It's just like, yeah, that's, you gotta think and micromanage your team and do that, But I guess we can just reload the save if any time one of our companions dies. And sorry, that is my tangent on Gaming Pastimes video, the way that he approached this game.
generally die on normal difficulty is if you've gotten into a bad position, or you got distracted from the game for a while. Instead, the majority of the challenge in the game comes from whether or not you will be able to reach the next merchant before running out of health potions, or get into one of those terrible situations where you've run out of resources to keep going at a good pace anymore. As you start running out of health potions, you'll find yourself start to play safer with your positioning, trying to draw enemies one at a time instead of full packs, and trying to convert mana potions into health by using healing spells from your mages. What really nails this gameplay conflict is the fact that it is entirely self-imposed and self-rewarding. In order
That is the that is a really good way to describe that. That it is self-imposed. Um, self. I need like the exact verbiage
to
there,
explain
but
what
his
really nails this gameplay conflict is the fact that it is entirely self-imposed and self-rewarding. In order to explain myself, I
self-imposed.
first have to bring up the fact that the game allows you to bring along packs.
So yes, this quote is so so true. I see it throughout the reviews that I'm doing. So, Gaming Pastimes playthrough, Accursed Farms playthrough, Pixelzaw's game playthrough, where so much of the issues that they have are self-imposed. Like they are not fully using the system that they have. Oh, inventory management is a bitch. It's so annoying. Oh, hey, are you using pack mules? Oh, I realized that I need to use pack mules, so I went back and bought them. Oh, that's great. That's just, you imposed this challenge on you, but then you rewarded yourself by buying this. Did you use transmute? Oh, no, I didn't use transmute at all. Oh, okay. So, yeah, you are imposing on yourself this challenge because you're not reading the spells that you can use and the spells that you can get and realizing, oh, this can help me with inventory management. Are you drinking potions or are you just hoarding them and not using them at all? Oh yeah, I'm just drinking potions and they're taking up space in my inventory. It's this is such an excellent quote that is like actually diagnosing what's going on with so many players. And it's like I'm going to be I need to put stars around that because I might just straight up yoink this part of his video and just give him the credit of this and say like, hey, it says JBJett said so much of this game is like you doing this to yourself. That's like a really good quote. JBJett does like I have my issues with some of his analysis, but he is like one of the only reviewers that I think like really contemplated the game before writing his and like thinking about it. So hats off to him.
Mules in order to lug all your items along, which is honestly one of the funnest implementations of a traveling bank system that I've ever seen. The thing is, this creates a decision tree where you have to decide at each merchant, do I want to load my entire donkey up on health and mana potions for the next trip? Do I want to blow all my gold on this sweet armor that my tank will be able to rock? Or do I want to try and save money in order to buy the most expensive weapons I can find at the next merchant? Theoretically, you could always take the easy route and just splurge on inventories full of health and mana potions at every vendor, but the greed in every little gamer's heart usually wins out and makes you really consider buying that mace for a 30% DPS game.
I also because we're talking about minute 25 here, and this is like gameplay decisions around shopping, really. And that I need like playing on normal versus playing on hard really changes this because it feels like there are a lot more decision points around gold on normal than there is on hard, and that's because hard gives you more money when you sell items. Like you sell items at a better rate on hard mode than you do on easy or normal. Um so because when I'm playing through my game right now, the hard run through that I'm doing, I'm not having difficulties financially. Like I can buy anything that I want. I can buy any number of potions and I have like a comfortable amount of money left over. Um this could also be because I'm just like more used to inventory management. And I'm more used to this game. That is a possibility. But yeah, it is very interesting. This has to be a normal phenomena, and this will be something I'm gonna put an asterisk here and just be like normal versus hard money cost changes, because that is something that is worth bringing up in the video and exploring, is like, hey, do we actually, like, how different is this? Because that could actually be something that detracts from hard mode, is like, hey, you actually, because you're playing on hard, are rewarded with more gold. And so like that sort of decision point that you have to make of like, okay, do I buy this, do I buy that, can become more obsolete quicker, and that is something that, like, you lose something there, you lose a decision point, um which is it's just another challenge that is lost for the player to overcome. So yeah.
What's great about this conundrum is that it really goes to show how good the loot system works in the game. Without loot that had worthwhile and noticeable effects on gameplay, you would always take the health potions every time. But in the specific instance of the ice caves, you can notice that absolutely everything in that dungeon was hitting me for bricks of damage, because this was the dungeon where I started to realize just how important it was to buy the best armor you can at each vendor. Once I was about halfway through the game and started to get a good idea of what ratio to inventory I should fill up on potions and which gear upgrades would really make the biggest difference, things picked up speed as I just blew through content without even needing to use health potions all that often. This is rewarded even more by the detail that drinking potions force characters into an animation for about 1 second or so, which is basically the only hard-coded animation in the game. Everything else, like casting, swinging a sword, or shooting a bow, can be interrupted at any time in order to move out of the way or switch targets.
I've seen in forums that drinking can be animation canceled. I'll have to poke around and find that out. But animation canceling in general is a strategy that people do use, especially when it comes to projectile weapons. And I think there's also like a melee animation cancel that can like help you swing faster, like, as well, where it, like, you, instead of like getting like 1, 2, 3, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there's a way to do that. Definitely gonna have to poke around the forums, look up Siege the Day and Dungeon Siege Heaven, and the Discord, Kingdom of Ebb Discord, shout out to them. Probably gonna have to poke my nose around there, but I think every animation in the game, or I think potions can be canceled as well, but potions hard animation / cannot be canceled. But I know it's a strat for like an all crossbow group to spam. There's a certain button that you spam. I think it's the standstill button S, to like completely ridiculously improve your damage output with each shot. So that's fun.
But the developers wanted drinking potions to be the real focal point in the game's decision process. Over time, I started to view the game as less of a combat problem and more as an adventure problem, where it wasn't just good enough to get through each encounter. Instead, I was much more concerned with getting through each encounter without wasting health potions.
And that's a good thing to note, but I'm just like looking at this inventory management, and we really value potions. Like, this is an insane amount of potions. I don't think I've ever had this many potions in my hard run playthrough. Like, granted, I load my players' inventories. Like, typically for my melee fighters, I do 5 rows of potions always, of the biggest size. So 5 full rows, and then for my archers, I do like 2 or 3 full rows. And then for my mages, I do 2 rows and then like 4 rows of mana potions. So 6 rows in total. 6 rows in total. But I never fully stock my donkeys like this. This is wild. This is crazy, especially if we're playing on normal. If we are playing on normal, this is wild. I am really intrigued, especially with we have 3 healers. Or no, sorry, we have 2. We have 2 nature magic, 1 combat magic, but the combat magic has battle healing as its off spell right now. So yeah, that's wow. We really want to heal.
Instead, I was much more concerned with getting through each encounter without wasting health potions when I didn't need to. Even if it's just the simple things like positioning your tanks so that breath weapons won't spray over your ranged characters, or pulling the entire party back when you get surrounded and need to get a better hold of the situation.
Yes, finally, a reviewer that talks about positioning and repositioning. Oh my goodness, someone that isn't just left click brain off. Thank you.
All the while, this lets you sit back and relax as you spend less time stressing about whether you'll succeed, and more time thinking about the bigger picture and how much loot you can hold. Well, except for one part of the game. As many people can attest to, the early days for video games had some questionable balancing decisions at times, and Dungeon Siege was no different for the times. Things certainly aren't as bad as the Neverwinter Night system that basically forced everyone to use good old Tommy. But there are some definite rough patches as far as enemy design is concerned. For anyone that's played the game in the past, the Goblin Workshops will definitely make you shudder at the thought of going through them again.
Yeah, 100% true. Goblin Factory is Goblin Factory encounter / difficulty spike. It is for sure like the most aggressive difficulty spike in the game. The boss is probably the hardest boss in the game. It's like between him and Krug Commander Gresh, between the hardest boss fights in the game. But I think he ekes out because of the way that he moves and repositions constantly. So you can't like cheese him. Well, you can cheese him, but like you can't you have to constantly be repositioning. You just have to be, or you have to set yourself up in a very particular position to be able to not have to do that. It is tricky. It's particular. But yeah, the Goblin Factory. Ouchie.
By this point in the critique, I've no doubt shown a lot of combat gameplay, but here I'd like to play a clip from the very first fight you encounter with the goblins as you enter their dungeon. You come down on an elevator and are immediately beset on all sides by goblins, which for some reason also happen to be very overtuned for their level in terms of damage and tankiness, but it doesn't stop there. The entire design...
I do want to, I'm gonna just put an underneath note for this, actually pull up stats / monster stat blocks for this area, because I do we have a claim here that they're way overstated for their particular level, and I don't entirely disagree. Intuitively it feels like, wow, these guys hit really hard and they have a lot of hit points. But I want to almost try to pull that up and support that with in-game numbers. And I might do something like that. So we'll put an asterisk on this one.
For the Goblin Dungeon is to put you into more and more terrible situations where enemies can pop out of crates, the walls, and even appear on elevators themselves. After surrounding your party, they then happen to use some of the best...
I don't know any elevators in the Goblin Factory where enemies appear on them. I don't know if that is the case.
Area of effect weapons in the game, like flamethrowers, Gatling guns, and electric tasers. To top it all off, the devs even knew that these weapons might be too OP in the player's hands, so they put...
I guess if you count a moving platform as an elevator, that might be a technicality, but sorry, I might be being a little pedantic there, to be fair to JBJett.
ammunition gauges on the weapons so that you wouldn't end up spamming them for the rest of the game. Mind you, there isn't a single other weapon in the game the devs ended up putting an ammo counter on. Finally, after you've slogged through some of the hardest content in the game, the dungeon caps it all off with one of the most challenging bosses in the game, named the Goblin King.
Well, I don't think they're actually named the Goblin King. I think it's like the Goblin Robo Suit. But a quick Google search can't verify this. Goblin Robo Suit Dungeon Siege. But yeah, it is the Goblin Robo Suit is the boss, and this is called he is the Goblin Inventor, I think is what he's referred to as. Yeah, he's not, I don't think he's called the Goblin King, but again, I'm not trying to be pedantic. I'm just like trying to be specific with the information that we're given. But yeah, the name of the boss is Goblin Robo Suit. That's what you see when you hover it, when you're fighting it, etc., etc.
Wretched invaders, everything wrecked. Sick no have magic staff. Stupid human wizard no have staff. Warding staff ours. Goblins, you all pay.
This Goblin Mecha Suit can use a flamethrower, a lightning rod, and melee attacks, all while attacking your entire party without any understandable threat mechanic, and independently moving legs that allow him to attack and move at the same time, unlike any other character in the game. This is the absolute hump in difficulty for the game, and anyone who makes it through the Goblin Caves will inevitably learn the skills needed to complete the rest of the game with ease. But, damn. After this dungeon was done, I had to set the game down for a couple of days because I just didn't want to deal with it for a while after getting through that area. The rest of the game kind of passes in a sleepy haze as you defeat beholders, crush skeletal armies, invade not Arabian towns, raid a dragon's lair, and ascend to the top of Castle Ebb, where they put the only elevator down to the dungeons. Weird architecture choice.
The rest of the game finishes in a sleepy haze as a statement. 30, 40. Sleepy haze. I'll just put it in quotes. But 30, 45. Krug Commander Gretsch is after this. And so the Furies, at least on hard mode, are actually difficult to kill. He calls them beholders because they look like the beholders from D&D, and in the game they're called Furies. They're hard. They deal a lot of AoE. You need to position, you need to be careful. Maybe that's just a hard mode only thing, but I'm fairly certain that in normal they also deal significant damage. Then there's Krug Commander Gresh, which is, it's between his boss fight and the Goblin boss fight that for the hardest boss fight in the game, for sure. And I'll be like, I think it is just Goblin Robosuit is the hardest, but to call Krug Commander Gresh a Sleepy Haze is not accurate, I don't think. There's also ambushes before you face the Droog that are pretty hard. The dragon is hard, not like he's not like incredibly hard, but like he is difficult. I wouldn't say that it's a Sleepy Haze to fight through him, but you can tell when you hit, specifically when you get through Fortress Croft, when you get to Fortress Croft. The rest of the game, or well, even before then, like the Temple Ruins specifically, like you go through the Temple Ruins where all the Furies are, things seem to get a lot shorter. Areas get a lot shorter as you get close to the end of the game. and then like the castle sequence, which is from the top, like from when you enter the castle all the way down to when you get to the dungeon in the Chamber of Stars. That is a long sequence, and then the molten lava into hell sequence is kind of long, but like you can tell that by the end of the game they're like, okay, let's wrap this up. You can definitely tell that.
But okay. And through it all, I was just happy to explore and find all these unique and mysterious creatures which spiced up the landscape. The enemies in the game aren't memorable simply due to their combat prowess or variety of attack patterns for the time, but also for the audio design behind them. There is
yes. We're not talking about like game time or like gaming pastime. We're not talking about generic sounds, whatever that means. Like, they're using like the stock sound effects or something. That's not what's happening. The diegetic noises in this game are amazing. Bestiary sounds are good, as well as unique move sets and designs. Yes. Truth nuke.
something deeply satisfying to me, hearing the heads pop as I run through half a dozen Krug one after another. Flap of a stone thrower's arm. And the satisfying death screams of the Sec elite forces. The sounds of the game are so iconic and repetitive that you can almost hear them in your sleep as you slog through the game. To make it all better, it's all underlined by one of Jeremy Sewell's earlier works in the gaming OST world, which always does a good job of making the story beats feel some
Jeremy Sewell mentioned. Sorry for interrupting you, but Jerry Sewell mentioned. And this is something else that I'm a big fan of JBJett's. He actually uses the soundtrack throughout his video. He just uses it. He doesn't just praise it, he actually uses it. So, yay, thumbs up for that. We're not praising the soundtrack and then playing other music over it.
Whether or not you actually find yourself invested in the characters. I think one of the best situations the theme kicks in is during the very final fight with Commander Gom. The fight is the only time in the game that you face a two-phase boss fight, and
yes, Commander Gom. I'm just writing this down because he's a big example of like the soundtrack and the success of it, and because the beginning to end, one of the first soundtracks you hear when you load into the game, and then this same chord progression, is used or in the final fight, so the Gom fight is very fun, and also it being the only 2 HP bar boss fight is appreciated. Like, especially, like, I hate it when in modern games, like in any of the Souls-like games, where it's becoming more and more normalized that, hey, where's the second phase? Where's the second phase? It loses its magic quickly.
The second part, where he becomes an extra strong summoner, allows you to test your skills at managing party aggro and how to deal with adds, while not going so far as to feel like an unpredictable fight like with the Goblin King. Then, seeing the final baddie pop into a shower of loot was just so rewarding. Up until the point the game crashed and I couldn't see the final credits for the main campaign. And the downside with having a fight that's challenging enough to feel rewarding when you beat it is that I didn't particularly want to go back and do it again just to see a cutscene. So this was the beginning of...
Yeah, I think this is an issue specifically with the Steam version. This might be the case. So, what is this? No, I'm a little bit ahead on my timing here. So, Steam issue with game crashing. But something I will say is, even if we're talking about the story and the narrative, like, and he talks a little bit about the world building and the background of it, he still doesn't completely talk about what's going on in the game and the story and what brings you to where and everything. So it is a little bit, you know, he just, there's still more that was to be said, but, you know, you can't be perfect.
The end for me, and certainly the end of the story for many players who only ever decided to play through the single-player section of Dungeon Siege 1. But since then, I stumbled into the darker history of Dungeon Siege and found out that there's 4 other campaigns and modules available to play. As time rages on, I can only imagine that Dungeon Siege may become more and more difficult to get running on modern software.
Yes, definitely a sentiment that even Accursed Farms 9 years ago realized. Issues with modern software. Absolutely true.
And thankfully, the base campaign works reasonably well on Steam with just the standard installation. If, however, you reach the end of the campaign and you want to either play with friends or simply run through the multiplayer story with a solo character, then I would strongly recommend that you look at the Steam guide named Legends of Arana plus Extras by Lady Montbaron on the Community Hub.
Hey, Lady Montbaron mentioned, and the guide mentioned. Nice. Lady Montbaron's Steam guide mentioned. Yes, this is the resource to use. Absolutely 100%. If you ever want to try to get multiplayer up, Legends of Arana up, or any Yesterhaven or Return to Arhok, like all of those expansions and the multiplayer, that's the guide to go to. It is also on that guide that you can find the Discord link to the Kingdom of Ebb Discord, which you can definitely join, reach out, talk to people about the game if you have any questions, or if you just want to find other people that like Dungeon Siege. You can absolutely do that.
It is technically possible to enable the multiplayer section of Dungeon Siege without installing any new files, but when I enabled multiplayer on my standard Steam version of the game, I encountered several game crashes and bugs that really prevented me from playing more than an hour at a time. And even if I didn't crash every couple of minutes, there's no real point in playing a technically inferior version of the game when you could just experience all the upgrades from the 2003 expansion, Legends of Arana.
Interesting. So this is the Legends of Arana transition here. 3500, Legends of Arana. And he does mention like technical advancements. I don't remember if he does go into like the changes that the game makes statistically. We'll have to see on that. But yeah, wow, we're treating the expansion like its own thing instead of like trying to cover both Dungeon Siege and Legends of Arana at the same time and failing to do either one. You know? Wonderful.
Unfortunately, neither Steam nor GOG offer the expansion for sale as of now due to licensing issues, since it was developed by a different developer named Mad Dog Software.
Yes, Mad Dog Software. We're paying attention. This is LOA, developed by Mad Dog Software, and cannot obtain on GOG or Steam. Yes, that is the crux of the issue. We love copyright. Woo! We love copyright. Woo! It's actually a good thing. It's just sometimes it's annoying like this. Oh.
This change of developers was caused since the main team at Gas Powered Games was working on a sequel, Dungeon Siege 2. I personally justified the ethics of the file download since I had owned the expansion on CD over a decade ago, but at this point I'm not even sure if money from Dungeon Siege sales even reaches the developers anyways.
This is interesting. He even mentions the ethical dilemma of doing this. And there is a little bit of an ethical dilemma when it comes to like downloading or using mods like this to like get access to this sort of game. For me personally, I justify it as if I could give money to the developers to get access to this experience, I would. And in the past, I used to own the CD version of the game and everything, so I've paid for the CD version twice, and I paid Steam for this version. And so for me, because I can't get access to Yesterhaven or Return to Arhok, or the Legends of Arana expansion in general, without like massively jumping through some insane hoops of like scraping online, like to find one person who's like selling them and whatnot, or like selling a disc that has all of the games on it and everything. It's like, at that point, yeah, am I even giving money to the original developer? No, not really. There isn't a way for me to do this without experiencing this, and at this point it's also like we are more than 20 years after this game being developed. I don't think I'm stealing anything here by going to like the community, Steam community, and downloading these files and whatnot to be able to play the game, you know? Like, if they were on Steam and I could pay the people who made this to do it, I would absolutely 100% do so. But because there is no reasonable avenue for me to do it, shrug, you know?
Either way, the add-ons available there provided me around another 30 hours worth of fun and finished out the story for the first Dungeon Siege game. With the release of the new expansion, the game was met with a much less interested group of game critics who harped on the game for being more of the same, which I can definitely attest to. The game was almost entirely the same as far as combat was concerned, with only small improvements to the system, which meant that anyone who liked it would continue to like it, while others would continue to dislike it. Thankfully for me, after a not-so-satisfying ending to the original campaign and a scratchy experience with the Steam version of the multiplayer, I just wanted more of the plain old combat.
It seems that we might not be getting into the nitty-gritty. This, or I guess it would be like 3655. But, more of the same in regards to combat. And on the surface, I can see how people come up and say that, but it's just like, they do add spells, they add item sets to like make item gathering more interesting, they add backpacks to get more loot, they fundamentally change how like damage is calculated and the importance of like the melee skill and the range skill stats specifically. So there are changes under the hood that don't make noticeable outward changes, but they do change stuff about the game. And if you like you can notice those you can notice those changes, but just like on the surface, superficially, you don't notice them. But like when you figure out like, oh, okay, because of these changes, I actually want faster attacking weapons rather than the slower attacking ones that deal more damage because of the way that damage is calculated, and etc. etc. You know, it does. There are differences to be noticed.
But for those people following the series when it was current, it was more of a stopgap attempt to keep people engaged while they waited for the eventual release of the sequel in 2005. Despite keeping the same formulae, the game did attempt some notable improvements, like implementing control groups for spell skill setups, so that switching from things like combat mage spells to healing mage spells were more fluid. They also
I need to hear this again. I need to hear that point again.
Skill setup.
This is 3719. I am a little bit confused by what he means exactly when he says this.
Improvements, like implementing control groups for spell skill setups, so that switching from things like combat mage spells to healing mage spells were more fluid.
I'm confused by this because if I'm playing a mage, and with the problems that we've noted earlier, you don't want to like multi-class because you're hindering yourself in like your mainline field. I'm not crossing the combat mage nature magic. Like I would do combat magic primary, dip in nature magic for like healing hands and transmute, and maybe healing wind if I can get my nature magic to level 9. But I'm not doing it anywhere near the other way around. Like I'm not using combat magic if I'm a nature magic person, and you don't even have to do nature magic if you're a combat magic person. So the control groups for the spell skill setup to switch between nature and combat magic, I don't know exactly what that refers to, and I don't know why it's relevant or what this is describing. So I'm not entirely sure what that means.
They also implemented a potion distribution button so that you could quickly distribute potions efficiently and intelligently among your party. Both notable but small improvements to the system. The other, far more interesting addition to the game was the introduction of set bonuses on rare pieces of gear. From the very first building in the game to the last dungeon, as long as you're searching the secret exploratory areas, you're now rewarded with even more satisfying loot than in the last game. Armor and weapons that can far outlive their ordinary effectiveness due to the modifiers from the set bonus. In addition to this, several new effects can randomly spawn on items, such as increasing your chance to hit, providing a permanent magic armor effect, or percentage-based chances to have additional effects like acid and petrification on hit. While these loot changes had few effects on how I chose to change armor sets on a character, for the most part, the ebb and flow of gear remained the same as the original, but with prettier colors.
We do talk about items here a bit. So we'll do this. Item sets and changes. Item sets, enchantments, and changes. But noticeably no mention of dex requirements or more robust intelligence. Yeah, so LOA actually implements stuff that's armor that's more favorable to dex-based characters, and does give more options for intelligence-based characters too. Like they do improve the intelligence-based armor from the base game, because the base game, like the robes and whatnot, were honestly quite depressing. Really quite depressing. They're supposed to get more enchantments, but frequently it's like, no, this is not it. I'm not getting enough out of this. So like even on my run through right now, it's like, oh, thank God I have some high level loot that requires strength 12 or strength 13, and I'm instantly slapping that on my mages. You know, it's It's a bit unfortunate, but LOA does improve that, and we don't seem to mention that here.
Instead of dealing with changes to the gameplay systems, all the player had to be concerned with was taking in the new locations, lore, and monsters of the new game. While the general feel of everything stayed the same, the majority of 10 hours it takes to run through the new campaign are almost entirely comprised of new enemy types. A good couple of them were only simple recolors and reskins of old enemies, but they at least put in the effort to make everything a little bit different. Because as any shallow gamer like myself can attest to, there's a big difference between a green orc and a red orc.
I don't like. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I want to re-listen to this point because I don't think I hope he didn't say what I said. I think he said.
Of 10 hours it takes to run through the new campaign are almost entirely comprised of new enemy types.
Okay, yeah.
A couple of them were only simple recolors and reskins of old enemies, but they at least put in the effort to make everything a little bit different. Because as any shallow gamer like myself can attest to, there's a big difference between a green orc and a red orc.
We must become the vessels of destruction that we were meant to be. Come, my warriors, drink from the dark waters, and you will be reborn.
Not only that, but instead of pack mules, you get to bring along pack dinosaurs, which may or may not be one of the most fun things that I've never known I wanted in a game. Just look at him try help. It's adorable. Now, once again,
it's funny because in the genealogy of Dungeon Siege the game, or the franchise, I guess, because you have Dungeon Siege and Dungeon Siege 2, and we're not talking about Throne of Agony or Dungeon Siege 3 here, but the new dinosaur pet is like, this is like the first testing ground of pets that become a thing in Dungeon Siege 2, where like pets, they're more than just being a donkey that has more carry weight, and they like turn into things that you can like feed items to, and they gain levels, and they're companions that like they like fight for your party and whatnot. And it's not a system I was particularly interested in when I've played through Dungeon Siege 2. Like I did all the side quests for like the additional or like the crazy pets that you could get. But I just, to me, it was just like, I didn't, after playing Dungeon Siege 1 and Legends of Arana, I was like, I don't see you as a thing doing that. I want you to carry my loot, you know? And that isn't to say that they shouldn't have pets that do that, but like the pet system is completely different from Dungeon Siege 2 and Dungeon Siege 1, which is, you know, a development.
Backstory and lore behind the events of the story really take the cake. This time, the lore states that an ancient race of progenitors developed such potent technology that they started to genetically develop sentient races to use as slaves, such as the cat-like Hanat and the lizard folk Zarask. They also allied themselves with the goblins and built a giant clock at the center of the island of Arana that was capable of controlling the elements and the weather across the...
I guess we are talking about plot, so... Or the... plot of LOA.
Entire island. Due to this obstruction of the natural way of things, a rift was opened which allowed the Shadow Jumper, a creature of great power, to enter their reality and begin an assault on the Ultraean way of life. They managed to imprison the Shadow Jumper, but not before it brought the Ultraean way of life to a standstill. Juxtaposed against this, once again, decent lore setup, the entire plot of the game involves around the Shadow Jumper stealing a staff that was being moved to your hometown, and the mayor asks you to go chase it down. Everything else in the game is side story, and the justification for your actions never waves from the hashtag #GetThatStaff mainline quest.
It does. It does. Your parents were heroes. They were involved in this quest and they died. That's not like side quest lore or side lore. Like your character does have it's not robust, it's not insane, but it is there that your character would have like a horse in this race because your parents went off to do this and then they died, you know. Your character does have plausible motivation or personal motivation to go and do this quest. So comparing LOA to DS base campaign says is same, get that staff, which is, I mean, like the staff element is, it is lazy. Like, why is the magic MacGuffin a staff? Like, do we need another magic MacGuffin? Like, this expansion could have been more, like, it could, like, this expansion is shorter than the base game, but it could have had a more interesting or robust storyline. Like, this could have been more fulfilling than it was. And, you know, they did make the improvement of saying, like, oh, hey, there were other people that are involved in your life that you would care about, your parents, and they were killed. And they were trying to do this thing, and now you kind of have to pick up the torch. So, like, it's there, but, like, this, it could have been a lot better, but what can you do?
What's so insanely funny about this in particular is that once you defeat the main villain at the end of the game, it will not play the ending cutscene until you pick up the Staff of Stars. It wasn't important to stop the evil force of darkness and magical energy, just grab the damn staff and come back to town. Despite the complete failure to give motivation for your journey, some of the side storylines that never even make their way into the quest log are really satisfying. In the very beginning of the game, you're introduced to the tale that your mother and father were once great warriors who left the town and never returned. But they left you a part of their armor set named Arhok's Law as an heirloom to remember them by. Slightly later, you'll run into a lone cabin at the edge of the village, which is inhabited by a friend of your parents, who goes on to lament that if you ever find their gear out in the wild, it's not likely that your parents would ever let go of their gear while they still drew breath. By the mid part of the game, you'll likely find the entire set, which grants such strong set bonuses that you can use it on a tank right up until the final moments of the game. As you near the end of the lizard folk based areas, you'll find a sepulcher dedicated to the heroes of Arhok, and 2 graves where your parents were laid to rest. During a vicious assault by the Lizard King, your parents bravely ventured out to confront him, and ended up losing their lives in battle. Afterwards, the Lizard King was weakened and had to draw back his forces from the siege due to...
Okay, I will give some credit here. I actually, I see what he meant by the side quest comment in regards to, the character lore of, or this lore in particular that I was talking about, like, you know, your parents being heroes of Arhok, and you, like, finding them and picking up the torch of being a hero and whatnot, and, like, defending Arhok, and defending the lands after they're endangered. So I do see what he means, because, like, it, you know, it is, like, tangential to the main storyline. I do see what he means. I guess, like, I internalize that as, like, being like, oh, like, you are, it is tangential, but, like, this is an inherent character motivation to step up to be the hero because your parents were heroes and they died as heroes, and, like, you're recovering their set. But I do see what he means. So again, JBJett, you're great. I floundered my L, but Defenders of Arhok, we'll just put that right here. I do see what you mean now. So, yeah.
Their heroic actions. Not minutes later, you can return to the castle courtyard and find the hulking beast that the Lizard King has transformed himself into using genetic experimentation. This time, the hero of Arhok is successfully able to kill the Lizard King, to which his death throes mention he never expected the child.
The child has defeated me.
That voice acting is that voice acting is just rough. The Lizard King, as he calls him, is yeah, very not impressive.
And none of this story related to any journal quest or mandatory content at all. Every conversation, and even killing the Lizard King, can be absolutely missed by pure chance if you get unlucky and lose out on some of the best ambient storytelling the game has to offer. No. The writers behind Dungeon Siege know what they're doing and deserve more credit for the small little side stories they managed to smuggle into this hack and slash. The absolute only explanation for the main story in both games is that they wanted the stories to take the backseat so that the gameplay would take the spotlight. I'm only saddened by all the stories like the Heroes of Arhok, which I probably missed by pure chance. Up until
I wonder. I do wonder about that claim of like they purposely want the main story to take the back seat. It's hypothetically speaking, main story takes backseat to gameplay. It does make me wonder, because it's just like, oh, well, then why would they include these little side quest things that you're willing to praise that are like actually interesting and written, and then just have the main story be bad? To me, it just it seems that there's a little bit of dissonance amongst the team themselves if that were to be the case of like, yeah, we don't care about the main story. The main story takes the back seat, but these side stories are interesting though. You know, like it's. I would demand more from them and just be like, yeah, no, the main story shouldn't be taking the backseat here. The main story should be good, especially since like the LOA is not in the same position as Dungeon Siege 1. You know, Dungeon Siege 1 is like 4 years of development, a lot of crunch, whereas LOA expansion is riding off of the success that DS had. Like Dungeon Siege had success, and the expansion is riding off of it. And because it's shorter and you've already done most of the development of the base game that you're using to make this expansion, your story should be more robust. Like, it should be easier to capture a good story, especially if it's not as long as the base game, like, you know, and you're not facing crunch. So I'm going to be more critical of the people that did LOA than the base game in regards to their story.
At this point, I haven't really touched on any of the side quest content, and that's because it's very bare bones. Theoretically, you may even get experience for completing quests, but it's so negligible that I have never even seen a level up due to completing any main or side quests.
I think that is true, funnily enough. I think side quest completion and EXP bonuses, or EXP rewards, I think they are there. They're just so minor. I think that is the case, and it is an interesting choice, where it's just like, oh, I guess we just like, why have this be a thing if we're not actually going to have it mean anything, you know? Like, the side quests are cool, and I would want to do them without having to get a experience reward, but if we are doing an experience reward, can we make that experience meaningful at all?
The problem with it all is that it's really not set up in any noticeable way. Many of the side quests are just recommendations to go explore a side dungeon, and so the reward is getting to see more content, while others, like the hide-and-go-seek book search in the town of Glassern, are more of an excuse to go explore the town and see that there's a whole 12 people living in the entire village. Some quests drop gold or items when you complete.
Hang on. So this side quest actually, in specific, is not just to see that Glacier has only 12 people in it. I don't even think that's true. I don't like Glacier side quest. Glacier only 12 people, which, like, that is a silly statement to make. The Glacier side quest gives you access to lore books, which helps flesh out the world building, a thing that you praised previously about, like, oh, there is actually more story to the bad guys than the main character and what he's going through, like, you know, the main plot line. There's more of a backdrop that's, like, actually there, and it's actually good. It's like something that you said, and it's like, it's because of quests like that that the world building is good, you know, or is worthy of praise in that specific instance. So yeah, Glacier has more than 12 people. Shocker, I know. But it also, that quest is to help give you lore. There is a financial reward that you get at the end of it. It's not really that big, but it's to give you lore and to give you context. So yeah, it's not just about money or about seeing 12 people. I know you're facetious, but it's annoying.
But it's always so negligible and uninteresting that you might walk away from the quest without even seeing the items on the floor. That's right. Unlike quest completion notifications that throw items right into your inventory, there was apparently no way to send items straight to your characters, so they instead just leave them on the ground for you to pick up, acting like they didn't just throw the crown jewel helm of the multiplayer campaign at the feet of the hero that saved the world. Other side quests are such a pushover that I would often just pick them up and randomly run into the character they wanted me to save at some point an hour later in my journey. And in many of these cases, there's no real convenient way to return to the quest giver or even see if there's any reaction. One of these situations...
I need to hear this point again.
And in many of these cases, there's no real convenient way to return to the quest giver or even see if there's any reaction.
Yeah, this to me would be like the strongest returning to quest giver and seeing reactions. Like, this is the strongest criticism, or like this, like, or hang on, this is the strongest argument for fast travel being a thing in this game, is the ability to go back and see the quest giver, and is the ability to see, like, the reactions. Because apparently, in the base game, the chief of the camp, the traveler camp, after you exit the Crystal Caverns, or the Crystal Caves, his name is Non, and he mentions Sikra, who's a companion that you can pick up after Fortress Cross. He is in the Hall of Skulls, or she is in the Hall of Skulls. She went missing, and you can go later on and find her, pick her up. Now, so I'm going to list it all out right now, and I'm going to list it out again in the video, but just to hit this point home. When you get to the Traveler's Camp, you have to go through the Dark Forest, you go through the Eastern Swamp, you go through the Goblin Factories, then you go through a smaller forest section, but it's called the Temple Ruins officially. You go through the Temple Ruins, then you fight you fight Crow Commander Gresh outside of Fortress Croth, then you're in Fortress Croth, then you go through the Hall of Skulls and find her at the end of that. So that is like 5 or 6 hours of gameplay that you have to go through to find her, which is fine. But then in order to bring her all the way back to, like, say, like, hey, I saved your daughter, you would actually have to spend like a half hour clicking backwards and then talking to them. And I'm pretty sure he does have, like, dialogue to say, like, oh, thank you for saving my daughter. I'm pretty sure he does have that dialogue. But you would then have to walk all the way back. And it's just like, okay, this I could see would be a good reason for, like, this like for teleporters, you know, like to bring you back to town. Like I can understand that position because it really doesn't make sense in a linear experience. It's hard to have something like that. You're like, hey, do this thing later on in this line, and then come all the way back to me, and then go all the way back to where you were in the line when you found it. That does get hard. You know, like that is a legitimate criticism of linear storytelling and linear gameplay. One that I have yet to hear from other reviewers, but it is definitely there. Yeah.
One of these situations involved a companion quest for the barbarian-looking giant character that joins you in Legends of Arana, who asked me to look for his village. At one point, I was absolutely sure I had taken the wrong turn and skipped visiting his village by pure mistake. But then a good 5 hours later, when I looked at my quest log, the quest had been completed by some lucky miracle. Maybe there was a storyline I missed, and an emotional reunion with his clanmates that I was supposed to see, but I sure didn't notice it. In fact, there's so many save this random person type quests that after reaching the next damsel in distress, I started having to look up in my journal which save my family / teacher / friend quest I had just completed.
Yes, that's LOA in a nutshell. I'll do lots of save X person side quests. Yeah, there are definitely. I can empathize with that. That definitely happened in my playthrough.
By the end of Arana, the only quest I had failed to complete was the very first kill a bear in a cave quest, and a part of me is kind of satisfied that that is the case. What Arana lacked in side quests, it more than made up for it with boss battles, which always managed to hold a lot more spectacle than in the first game. While the first game held a giant spider, a mecha suit from hell, a beholder, a stationary dragon, a necromancer that runs out of ads, and a pretty decent final boss, Arana takes things in almost the opposite direction. The giant spider became just some random side area, and instead we were left with the giant larva queen, who comes with her own cinematic and warriors that pop out of her rear. Then we end up meeting this dope undead centaur lich who shows up the Dungeon Siege original lich by never running out of skeletons to throw at you. You even have the optional Lizard King boss fight, which pits you up against a super steroid spellcaster that you might even have a vendetta against if you read about your parents. Finally, you get to face the Shadow Jumper, which the entire game has been leading up to. You fight through a nuclear landscape full of mutated goblins, defeat the goblin warrens a second time, battle through all the natural elements in order to fight the man made from darkness. And then you fight his ads while he stares at a clock, then turns invincible until you hit his green gem hemorrhoids in order to finally finish him.
Yeah, so this is the Shadow Jumper fight here. So 48, like 48:35 Shadow Jumper fight. The Shadow Jumper fight is like very weird because this game is developed by Mad Dog, but this fight in particular really like it's a sign of what is to come in Dungeon Siege 2 with the boss fights that goes there, and like the boss fights turn into almost like raid bosses that you would find in like Warcraft or similar things in like Destiny. I'm more familiar with like the Destiny and Destiny 2 things, but they shift away from like one big enemy that has like a unique move set or like moves around in a unique way. It shifts from that to like, oh, destroy these pillars, kill this creature first and then you can damage the boss. Do like, like the, stuff like that, which I don't want to, it's not explicitly a criticism, but it's also like, you do see the weight of other games and other genres start to weigh in on this game as early as right now. Or as early as right now, as early as LOA, as early as the expansion.
What a letdown. The setup as you near the end of the game is so dope, but then you're kind of left with this janky boss battle where my ranged character kept getting one-shot by mechanics I still don't really understand. And unlike the final boss, this one doesn't even grace you with a second phase, which more than bummed me out when I realized that it was the only part of him I was going to fight. On the bright side, he does drop a really awesome staff, the same one you're supposed to return at the end of the story, but I ended up using to beat the next 3 modules of the original Dungeon Siege. Yeah, that's right, in addition to the multiplayer story, there's actually 2 mini modules that were released separately from Legends of Arana. But before I talk about the weird one-offs, I really have to mention the disco room real quick. After defeating the Shadow Jumper, you can return to a giant door that you pass deep within the Goblin Workshops, which will now mysteriously be open. Journey down the elevator and you'll be met with a
disco. The disco room mentioned.
disco room. The developers put in this cool little Easter egg where the main disco man will even award you with a sweet hat and one of the best spells in the game for beating the main storyline in the expansion. So as you watch me play through the rest of the game, that's my justification for having a chicken fly around in circles throwing eggs at my enemies. What's great about it is that none of the stuff absolutely trivializes the rest of the game, since you still have to play through the rest of it with a solo character in multiplayer mode. So now that my character is extra funky, it's time to start exploring the one-off area named Yesterhaven. Yesterhaven is a 2 to 4 hour standalone campaign following the events of the hero.
We are getting into areas that I actually haven't played yet. I have not played Yesterhaven yet. I do plan on giving it a mention and playing through them and possibly doing some gameplay, but we'll see when we get to it. Because like 2 to 4 hours of content, this definitely just seems like an official mod pack, you know? Like an official, like, hey, look at what I made, you know, something that you can find online in like a forum page where like people are like, hey, here's this entire game I rebuilt using the Dungeon Siege engine, you know.
Event that was included in the August 2002 issue for the PC Gamer magazine. There's several new models included in the story, and a couple of really interesting new locations like the giant ice towers and Fire Fortress, where the Ice Queen and Fire King do battle over the course of the story. Since the length of the game is so short, the story kind of reads more like a fable tale, but it's pretty well written for such a spin-off add-on. As the hero of Ebb travels across the northern realms following the defeat of the Sec, they randomly come across and
something that I find interesting that he's doing here, though, is because he's importing his own character here, and it's just like, oh, I'm like, you know, I'm not gonna one-shot these, I'm not gonna have an easy time because it's only a single-player thing. Something I do notice is he's using nature magic now on this character, which, if we go back to here, we can see his nature magic is 0. So when he's fighting in Yesterhaven using his nature magic, he is effectively starting as like a lower level character. Granted, he has increased AC and all that sort of stuff, increased HP, so he's really never going to be threatened by any of the monsters. So it's like, yeah, it doesn't really matter whatever they throw at you, because you just have so much defense and so much HP that they're just never going to threaten you. You're also using your weakest thing to not like completely run through everything. It's still going to just take you time, which is something that I do find interesting to note here. We're using Zap, the earliest level magic spell, to fight these enemies with like 70 HP and 16 HP. If he's hitting with his melee weapon, he's one-shotting them.
Memorial in the center of them. As the hero approaches the monument, some unknown power teleports them back in time to find the village covered by a white frost caused by the Snow Queen, who lives to the east of the village. The mayor quickly tasks you with finding an expedition that was sent out to make contact with her, and you begin your story in the wacky world of Yesterhaven. The story follows 3 acts as you explore the Snow Queen's domain, return to the town, and find it beset by an undead plague, and then finally confront the evil mastermind in the Fire King's fortress during the 3rd act. While short by nature of its release as a type of demo for the bigger campaigns, the amount of work that went into making a different feeling adventure is really laudable. None of the areas are simple reused maps from the old game, and the 3 bosses are all unique models with surprisingly entertaining battle sequences. What's most notable about the scenario is that it's the first time that in-game cinematic sequences play without the player losing control, such as when the Ice Queen defeats some of the Fire Crud.
Yes, that is a thing to know. I do have friends that are like big on not having cutscenes, so in-game cutscenes. Don't lose control of player. So I have friends that are like, oh, I don't think cutscenes should be in games, or cutscenes should be used as minimally as possible, because anything that I'm trying to sell or say narratively in my story, I should be able to say within the game. I don't have that position personally. I do think that there are instances where we can criticize games for using cutscenes when they could just use something in the game engine, but yeah, it's just, that is an interesting thing to note.
That have ventured into her lands. It really feels like the team that worked on Yesterhaven treated it like a playground to mess around with the ideas they had floating around for small improvements to the game. Despite its short runtime, I think that Yesterhaven was some of my favorite time spent on Dungeon Siege, simply due to the grandeur they packed into such a small scenario.
I don't wanna like criticize, I know that like it seems like very interesting the way that this works, but this makes me question the 2 to 4 hour thing that he gives now, because it's like your character is a souped up character. Like, just because you're using nature magic and you're like dealing less damage, like you still have insane amounts of HP, insane amounts of armor, insane gear. This really makes me wonder, like, this really does paint your experience of Yesterhaven. So I wonder how different it would be if you had been playing with a fresh character.
When you're transported through time to the snowy village, it's such a unique moment, unlike anything else I had seen in Dungeon Siege up until that point. And the process of coming back to the village only to find it overrun by spiders, corpses, and even presenting friendly NPCs that will turn hostile after you talk with them as they lose their humanity. Up until the point you have the golden chalice you've been chasing, and watch it get stolen away from you right in front of you by the Fire King, leading up to the final reveal that the unknown trainer who you've been running into over and over is actually the godlike being that brought you back in time to solve the situation. If you have Dungeon Siege available but haven't known about or tried Yesterhaven, I have to resoundingly recommend this gem, because it just left me smiling at every turn. It's even canonically fine to play through the scenario as a high-level character, plowing through the waves of enemies, since you're supposed to be the hero of Ebb following the main storyline. Unfortunately, in every way that Yesterhaven succeeds as a standalone story, The next short campaign is more of a marketing ploy. The return to
54, 20, 54, 23. This is Return to Arhok. Yeah, the Yesterhaven thing, I am intrigued by it. I do want to try it. I do think that this, well, I'll have to do my own investigation of it for sure. But JBJett has sold me on trying it, and just seeing the developments that were made there of like the in-game cutscenes, quote unquote, that like the in-game effects that serve in place of cutscenes, that does make it interesting. The story being more fairy tale like and shorter does seem really interesting. Moving away from staffs as a plot element, that's very cool. I like that. A different story entirely with like the Ice Queen, the Fire King, and it does seem very promising.
Arhok is a 30 to 45 minute adventure that you are absolutely justified in not knowing about. This module was released as a Windows XP exclusive product that players could download for free in an attempt from Microsoft to promote the budding System OS. Since Dungeon Siege was published by Microsoft, it made sense that they would want to use it as an in-house IP in order to ship their new system, but I think it's best for everyone involved that this never got much press. To start off, the game is single-player only, so you can't play it with any of your friends, and the story begins as an epilogue to the main Legends of Arana storyline. Supposedly, the main character chose to become imprisoned with the Staff of Stars since it was quote-unquote too powerful to hide and too dangerous to destroy.
But the Staff of Stars was judged too powerful to remain in the land and too dangerous to destroy.
Yeah, that is oof. Yeah, bad story beats staff from LOA, too powerful to remain, too dangerous to destroy. Yeah, this is what I think of this is what I think people who think about Dungeon Siege 1 think the quality of the story is. And then like Dungeon Siege 1, it's like, oh no, it's not actually that bad. It's very bare bones. It's very generic. But when you look at it, it's just like, oh, okay, wait, no, there's actually some thought put into this. There's some lore here. This is interesting. This could go places. We can build from these skeletons that are put here. And then there's that, too powerful to remain, too dangerous to destroy. And so we just freeze it in a statue,
But 15 seconds later, the town scholar ends up releasing you from your statue, and the staff breaks anyways. So I guess that plan didn't work out too well.
Yeah.
They implement a system where you can pick up a book and instantly reach level 10 in any skill, as well as 2,000-ish gold pieces in order to buy equipment, potions, and followers.
Oh yeah, this is not good. If we're doing this kind of like the level 10 and 2,000 gold jumpstart. I understand that this is a way to like, it's just like, okay, we want to put the player character here for this expansion experience, or this module, whatever you want to call it. I can understand that, but also it's just like, this is like showing that, hey, we don't want classes, but choose from one of the 4 classes, It sort of goes against the original design philosophy, which you can do. I just find it very funny and very amusing.
I decided to skip buying equipment since I figured it dropped often enough from enemies, and I unfortunately ended up buying a combat mage's help instead of the nature mage I thought he was, and we're on our way to save the mage. I was instantly beset by some of the hardest combat encounters I ever had to experience in Dungeon Siege. Not because the enemies were complicated or presented good challenges, but because the team I could develop on such a small amount of money was absolutely weak. My main character fighter had no body armor, and for some reason this module happens to drop almost no armor until the last moments in the story.
Okay, this does make me want to play through it. Like, just to test these drop rates myself. I don't know. Like, test the drop rates of items and everything, but I mean, we did make this decision to not try to equip our character at all, which is an interesting one. You know, I do see a bit of it. So like hardest combat experiences in DS1 due to lack of equipment drops. We did kind of self-impose this, which is something that we mentioned earlier, actually. Some things are self-imposed.
There are no vendors scattered throughout the scenario, so there's no point in all the gold that they give you instead of actually useful gear or potions.
Hang on, wait a minute, what?
There's no point in all the gold. There are no vendors scattered throughout the scenario, so there's no point in all the gold that they give you instead of actually useful gear or potions. And there's no companions that join you free of charge on your journey, such as a nature mage with healing spells, which would really come in handy.
So I'm confused by this because there's no one that you can sell things to. But in this main area they give you gold, and apparently you can buy people to join you on your journey. I'm a little bit confused. That does seem like a conflict. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but
the entire module just makes me shake my head as you finish searching for the mayor by finding a Hassat raiding party by a portal to Arena. They threaten to invade your village if you don't help free their king, so instead of murdering an obviously hostile enemy force, we decide to help them by destroying a much larger zombie lizard man army. What? So we enter the Great Dodongo Cavern Head, fight down through the dungeon, and find some random Ultraean who is never really referenced at any other point. Then descend to the final floor in order to fight the final boss, shadow beast monster named Raz, and free the Hassat king. Along the way, the Hassat raiding party gave you a Hassat fighter as a companion, which would be cool if only he acted as a companion character instead of a random NPC summoned to follow you around and almost help somewhat until he dies shortly later. And to top it all off, the final boss is wildly overtuned. You'll probably be out of healing potions by the time you reach him, and he even has a fire breath ability that looks like you should try avoiding with skill-based play, but it actually just has an unlimited range. The sheer amount of cheese that I had to pull off in order to beat this monster.
The thing with this boss that I'm noticing actually is the insane tracking. I'm sorry, I'm just like sitting here listening. This is not content that I've experienced myself before, but like the tracking of this guy's attacks is very interesting. So rocks tracking. This all of this stuff is going to help me when I play through the game. And I'm not just trying to take JBJett's content here. I'm just he is again the one who does the most thorough exploration of Dungeon Siege as a game and all of its expansions and everything. So yeah, the tracking of the enemy is very interesting because it doesn't like, oh, I can't like even like click to position or reposition. Like I can't get him to commit to an animation, you know?
In a good amount of time was insane. Kiting enemies, running circles, abusing the death mechanics, and generally just suffering my way through the module. This heap of garbage is such a joke compared to the fun you can find in Yesterhaven that it would have the opposite effect on motivating people to get Windows XP by showing off the fact that a system's update can't make a video game any better than the effort it receives. Don't play Return to Arhok. You will never even find the mayor that was the entire point of your resurrection in the first place. But I left one of the best experiences in Dungeon Siege for
There we
last,
go.
which is the multiplayer campaign.
Yes, we are getting into the multiplayer. It's interesting how we leave it for last. Seemingly the last section of the video. I wonder if... I don't think I'm going to do it that way. I think I'm going to do the base game single player, then base game multiplayer, then LOA, then the rest of the expansions. I think that's how I'm going to do it.
The Ultraean Peninsula. To tell the truth, the fact that this mode came out with the original Dungeon Siege game and was only slightly improved by the new gear in the expansion makes me sad that I never explored it during my youth. The main story follows the ambitions of the High Priest in Arhok, who wants you to return the 8 townstones to his giant contraption in the city. In order to do this, you'll have to visit each of the 8 towns in the game and solve their struggles to find the townstones, since each of them have gone mysteriously missing only just before the call to return them all to Arhok. Some of them will require you to go grave robbing in order to find them, while my favorite one involves resurrecting a fallen priest who died in a Arhok ice cave. The thing is, all of the areas you explore for this are basically remade using the tile sets from the first game, but the things that they do with those old tile sets are just extraordinary. Instead of party-sized corridors and dungeons, a lot of the locations put in effort to make the same basic tools feel much more epic.
Yeah, from the multiplayer, what I remember, it's like the scale is greater. Tile sets are used really well. Unlike the Return to Arhok, as we just watched, and like even though they have like new enemies and whatnot, like stuff from the LOA expansion that they moved in and some of their own unique creations, here it seems like the multiplayer is really was given a lot of attention and a lot of care, was in regards to the play experience. So this would be usage of tile sets and scale.
Some of my favorite moments include running down the icy cliffs or traversing through the now much more open nature of the Goblin Warrens, and it's all improved ever so slightly by having several paths in between each area, including a main hub of teleportation circles that can bring you anywhere you want in between cities. But the pathing of the map also has a habit of bringing you around in loops to find shortcuts back to places you never thought connected to each other.
So this would be a credit to like something that's more quote unquote open world, with like things that loop back to each other, unlocking areas, that sort of stuff. It reminds me of Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 1 is not an open world game, and I don't entirely think that the multiplayer of Dungeon Siege is an open world game either. I do think they have to play through areas to unlock them, and you need to be at a certain level to reach certain areas or to spawn in certain areas. So there's that. But it's this idea of like a central hub, like Firelink Shrine, where you play through different areas of the game and like you take different routes, and you end up finding your way back to Firelink, and you're like, oh wow, that brings me back here, and that connects me to over here, and I can actually take this elevator down and go to Valley of the Drakes or whatever. Oh gosh, does that elevator go to Valley of the Drakes, or does that elevator go to New Londo? Oh no. I'm gonna be getting so much shit for that. I'm gonna be getting so much shit for that and for not knowing that. I'm sorry, everyone in advance. But that is a strength of this design. It's not open world, but it's not linear. You know, it's finding a interesting middle ground.
The verticality of the entire map creates the type of exploration and realizations that you normally would find in a Dark Souls game, as you suddenly realize that the undead crypts you just spent 2 hours walking through end up having an opening right next to the starting town. They then take every bit of three-dimensional map development they had in order to create an optional puzzle dungeon that you may or may not just randomly come across in the dark forest. There are no map markers, signposts, or quests to lead you to this random pit of doom, but when you finally make your way there, you'll find that several signs have been conveniently placed recommending you stay away from the despair in its depths. Once you find your way down the elevator, you're presented with a view of a couple chests and a challenge to find your way through the pitch-black dungeon using only your wits. I will admit, I only knew about this dungeon because I happened across a guide for it during my research on the game, but I tried my best to complete the dungeon without following a step-by-step walkthrough of the place, and even with my rudimentary knowledge of what objects I had to pick up and put where, it still took me a little over an hour of exploring the dark halls in order to reach the end chests. As one of the last things I ended up doing in the game, this dungeon was a nice change of pace, as I had to puzzle my way through a maze of corridors instead of simply...
Yeah, this is the Pit of Despair, so... Yeah, Pit of Despair and puzzles.
destroying everything in sight, and it's definitely one of those hidden experiences of Dungeon Siege that I would recommend you go experience at least once if you replay the game.
There's something to be said here about like these side areas and puzzles. I can see how like they can be interesting, and I do think that you can do puzzles in a fun way, but I just do remember thinking about Dungeon Siege 2 and the constant use of just like, oh, take this orb and put it in this socket and go find the life orb, go find the death orb, go find the blind orb, and it being very tedious. And it's just like, okay, this is a puzzle, but we can be fresher with this. So it's interesting to see this design, because this is a part of the base game. It's the multiplayer, but it's the base game. And so it would be interesting to play through this, and when I get to play through this, to see how this compares to Dungeon Siege 2.
The loot you get at the end wasn't very useful to my character, but the fact that the item icon looks like a paper bag makes me hopeful that the reward for completing the dungeon is literally just a paper bag to put over your head. Finally, I'd like to talk about the two unique biomes that the multiplayer mode introduces to the game, which are the Arhok Castle and the Endless Dunes. Unlike Castle Ebb from the base game, the Arhok Castle has a far more dignified and extravagant air to it. In my directions to get to the final town, it mentions that I have to go through the dungeons of Castle Arhok, so I of course assumed that the entrance to the dungeons would be on the top floor of the area, since that's how the base game worked. What ended up happening is I explored every inch of the castle and just enjoyed walking through the courtyards, throne room, gardens, and ramparts, looking everywhere but where I was supposed to go. Frankly, I'm kind of
Yes, you know, in the base game, when it's linear, like you don't have this joy of just poking your nose around, you know? It is basically just like travel through a straight line, and then where they so happen to put that elevator that continues onward is where it is. And so, yeah, going to the top of the castle, essentially, which you're not, like, yeah, you're not exactly at the top, but I'm being pedantic. But going up to a higher level of the castle to take an elevator to bring you down into the dungeons is a bit lumpy, you know? And so being able to poke your nose through this castle is very, very good. This is Castle Heroth. I don't remember this area exactly perfectly, but the multiplayer, again, I think I do like the way that Dungeon Siege has like the multiplayer single player divide, because I do like that single player narrative experience where it's like very linear and you have your party and whatnot. But having a multiplayer like this was also very interesting, and I wonder if there's a way for Dungeon Siege to almost like marry the two concepts. It's hard. It's really hard.
Happy I went the wrong direction at first, because it just goes to show that the developers were willing to create this side area that they knew almost no one would end up seeing, and that no one had any reason to explore. Its only purpose is to flesh out the world and give gamers just a little more area to waste their time away. Of course, the only way to top exploring a castle is to really start wasting your time in the desert sands. While the castle was unique in its setup compared to the base game, the desert sands are really something that you can never see in either of the Dungeon Siege single-player campaigns. There are no enemies as you traverse the dunes, and only the unending waves of sand as you climb up and down the slopes trying to find the final town in the game. The denizens of Heroth recommend that you don't even waste your time trying to go through the deserted landscape, and use the
Yeah, this is something that this is a value that the multiplayer has that's distinct from the base game, like the campaign. The closest thing to the campaign that you have to this is the swamp, because you can actually walk through the swamp. The swamp is very, very wide, and so you can poke around in the swamp or walk through the water of the swamp and get the closest vibe to this as you can, but it's not the same. The scale is not the same and the environment is not the same, so we'll just say 0500. This is Gray Skull, I believe it's called, and the desert.
teleporter instead, but it creates such a different feeling to the multiplayer endgame than anything you've seen before. This is the type of monster that you just can't chop its head off no matter how many levels you have or weapons at your disposal. I honestly don't know if it was sheer luck that I ended up finding the Oasis, or if the developers have done an extraordinary job of subconsciously making people walk the right direction by chance. But wandering at random only to find a hidden gypsy camp in the middle of a desert is something that belongs in a Zelda game, and I was never expecting to find it here. After reaching the desert oasis, you'll then descend into the Forgotten Temple in the sands and listen to the main theme play as you cut through ranks of the endgame monsters in order to find the final townstone. The game feels like it's coming to a close now as you place all the pieces of the puzzle into the giant device back in Heroth and watch it sprout an angry red light that fills the air. The High Priest realizes his mistake, that a race of evil creatures was imprisoned within the device and are now ravaging the land, so he sends the hero bearing the 10 stone down into the depths to seal up the creatures from hell. You fight your way through a wild mob of spellcasters and find a magical lock deep within that allows you to seal up this evil for good and open the final.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, like, besides, like, you know, hey, grabbing all these 10 or grabbing all of these, stones for the, like, to open up this magical contraption, it being like, oh, turns out there was, like, a enemy that was sealed within, you know, it does, like, scream sec a little bit, like, which in the base game, but, I mean, it's not egregious, but it is sort of just like one last heist, and we need this one last enemy, this ancient enemy that was sealed within, you know?
door to a room full of treasures from times past. I won't lie, the whole process feels like a fitting ending and a real synopsis of what the Dungeon Siege experience is like. An ancient evil is released. You blow through waves of enemies in cool locations. Jeremy Sewell rocks out in the background and you earn some awesome loot as a reward. Oh yeah, and when you return to the High Priest and tell him you succeeded, he drops the most powerful helm on the continent onto the ground for you to pick up, so I guess they had to make concessions somewhere.
Yeah, putting things in your inventory is not a strong suit for them. But even then, it is. I feel like this item is more symbolic. I wouldn't call those enchantments to be the strongest thing in the game. I definitely wouldn't. The hat that he has on currently, I think, is the strongest thing that you can get in the game. Like the strongest single helmet item. Besides, like, farming insane drops and getting, like, an insane roll that would take hundreds of hours to get, you know, which is like, why am I even here at this point? But, you know, hey, at least you go back and there is something.
This is it. This is everything that Dungeon Siege is and ever aspired to be. A wild hack-and-slash party adventure game that took its inspirations from Diablo and then threw it all back into a fantasy RPG setting. In fact, they end up taking so much inspiration from Diablo that they even included their own homage back to the secret cow level of old. See, back under the device...
Yes, the chicken level... The chicken level. I have not seen the chicken level. I have not personally been to the chicken level, but I have. It's anyone who has played this game knows about the chicken level. And it requires items from, or it requires an item from the main campaign and items from the multiplayer to unlock it. So it's yeah, it do be known. It do be known. And it is definitely an homage.
In Wrath, you can find a riddle book that asks you to bring Fury's Eye, the starting knife, and the book itself to a hidden dais in the Forgotten Mesa next to Quillrab City. These items represent your journey from that of a farmhand with the weakest weapon in the game, through your journey across Ebb into Forgotten Dungeons, and finally with the completion of the story on the Ultrain Peninsula. Placed upon the dais in an equally hidden area, an elevator descends from the heavens and brings you to your final leap of faith before you reach the gods of this land. Here lie the super-powered chickens, each named after one of the developers of the game, along with the fire-breathing brown cock, Chris Taylor, the lead developer. It may be one of the best places to go get endgame loot in the game, but the chickens also happen to be so powerful that I had to pull them one by one in order to take them out. Supposedly there's an even greater super chicken hidden behind this final door, but I felt like my time with the game was at an end and completed my journey back down to Earth. While my experiences with the game ended there, over the course of the years, the Dungeon Siege team would continue to support the game by releasing several updates to the map editor and mod creation software that they developed. Some really interesting interviews over on the Dungeon Siege Haven website have thankfully been archived and indicate that Yesterhaven was actually an attempt from the Dungeon Siege team to motivate and inspire other creators to create even better stories than their original game.
Yes, the modding scene of Dungeon Siege is modding scene, yes, and modding support. Definitely, I didn't realize this as a child because, you know, I was like 4 when I started to play this game, but it was. This game was so much more than its campaign. It was so much more than LOA. You know, a lot of it was the multiplayer experience, and then what the community around the game was doing. You know, what mods they were making, what maps they were making, all of that. That to me is there's like two sides of the Dungeon Siege coin. There is like the sense of journey and adventure in the base game, or in the base campaign, and then there is the customizability, the modding of the game itself through the multiplayer and through, you know, the modding support that was given to the fan base.
These newer mini mods are often referred to by the community as siegelets, although many mods go much further than that in an attempt to convert the entirety of Ultima 5 and Ultima 6 into games through the Dungeon Siege universe, while others are more simple, like allowing you to play through the multiplayer campaign with player-controlled companions. Similar to the modding world created by Neverwinter Nights, Dungeon Siege was not content to simply create a game and then let it die, but rather set up the tools needed for DMs and creators to experiment with for years to come. According to the forums over at projectbritannia.com, there appears there's a small number of people still playing the mods, and the full conversion of Ultima 6 claims to be in its final version if you want to go check it out right now. Before I start wrapping things up, I'd also like to touch on the nature of other games that ended up taking after the Dungeon Siege formula for party-based hack-and-slash action. The obvious follow-ups of Dungeon Siege 2 and its expansion obviously go without saying, but after some wandering around the weird parts of Steam, I ended up finding some more modern titles which might meet the same itch.
Okay, so this is something, so 45 modern titles similar to Dungeon Siege.
I'll preface this by saying I haven't had the chance to check out any of these games myself, so I could be totally wrong, but Nyx by Tangren Entertainment, Ember by N-Fusion Interactive, and Kenshi by Lo-Fi Games look like they would be games I'm personally interested in, due to the time I just put into Dungeon Siege. Other than that, if you like this kind of content, please leave a like or a comment letting me know if I should do more videos. Over the years, I've always found myself inspired by YouTube video essays created by Joseph Anderson, Mandalore Gaming, and Noah Caldwell-Gervais, and I felt like it was about time that I finally gave back to the community and tried to provide some commentary on the best form of media in the world. The fact that Dungeon Siege was able to pull me back into its clutches for another 55-ish hours of fun nearly 2 decades after its release is impressive, to say the least. And what I found waiting for me at the end of the game was a genuine sense of satisfaction, which didn't just rely on nostalgia in order to succeed. Dungeon Siege continues to be an outstanding game, which outlasts the tests of time and delivers an experience that is hard to find elsewhere. I hope you all keep playing games and having fun until we meet again in another video elsewhere. Bye.
Damn. Well, that was JBJett's review of a review, critique, and analysis of Dungeon Siege 1. It is by far the best review that has been published, at least the best review that I've seen that has been published on YouTube or anywhere else. His video, where maybe Pixels' motivated me from a place of frustration, JBJett's motivated me from a place of like, oh, thank goodness there's someone else that like that is like willing to sit down and to like really pop open the hood and look at what's underneath, and someone that like is willing to appreciate and see what's actually going on with the game. There's definitely some criticisms that I had throughout this video, as you probably have noticed, but please go check out JBJett's YouTube, go check out his video. He hasn't been active in a bit of time, but hopefully he will return and continue to make videos, because this video is a testament to his ability as a reviewer. I think he did a very good job, a very, very good job. So, all right, that's it for this one.